House of the Dragon is back with season 2. We're back in King's Landing. We're back in the north. We're back with child murder and secret scandalous sex. We've even got a brand new opening sequence, which is pretty exciting. We've got this tapestry situation. So now every episode of House of the Dragon begins with a PowerPoint presentation about Targaryen history. And my enthusiasm for that is unironic. There's actually some extremely weird and interesting lore being hinted at by this opening sequence, which we will get into. I think there's some Valyrian blood magic dragon origins secrets in here, so we will get into it. Today we will talk all about House of the Dragon Season 2 Episode 1. We will not spoil future episodes, but we will talk about information from the books and interviews. We'll show maps and family trees so that we can more deeply explore the Hot D. Welcome. Old Shift X is back. We will be doing these weekly live streams every week right after each episode comes out at about 10 p.m. Eastern Time Sundays. So press like, press subscribe, and we will also be releasing our edited, scripted Old Shift X videos during the week. It'll probably come earlier each week this season, which will be great. So thanks so much for joining in. Let's talk about House of the Dragon. So the most significant things to happen this episode are obviously the murder of little Jaehaerys Targaryen by blood and cheese, which is horrible. We also got to meet some new characters, like we got to meet Alan of Hull. We got to meet Lord Cregan Stark, Lord of Winterfell, back in the north. We got to see Daemon get back in his murder cloak. We got to see Alicent and Kristen secretly having sex, all of which is wonderful and horrible and exciting. So I think this has been a really cool beginning to the season. So what should we do first? How about we talk about this new opening sequence? Because in the previous season, each episode started with this sort of grey, blurry CGI sequence of blood running down through Viserys' model city, which represented the Targaryen family tree in a very abstract way. And that was fine, but I do much prefer this new tapestry sequence, because this tapestry, it puts the actual events and happenings of House of the Dragon in the context of the last 100, 200 years of Targaryen and Valyrian history. You'll remember that last season, Helena talked about hand turns loom, spools of green, spools of black, dragons of flesh weaving dragons of thread. It evokes these themes of destiny and history and bloodlines and interconnection. And so I think this is a really appropriate way thematically to introduce and contextualize the series. And so we can actually recognize each of these specific images. They all correspond to events in Targaryen history. So it begins with this image, which is almost, it looks the same as Viserys's Valyria model. So Valyria was the ancient empire of the Dragon Lords. Hundreds of years ago, they dominated the world with their dragons and with slaves. The Valyrians were a evil empire who conquered and enslaved lots of innocent people. And as Viserys told us last season, they conducted blood magic in their volcano lair, where the blood mages did nasty things in the Enogrion. The books have even more details about, they interbred animals with humans, and they had these pyromancers, and it's implied that their dark magic may have caused the doom, the destruction of Valyria when it was destroyed, like Atlantis. And so this is the ancestral homeland of the Targaryens, also of the Velaryons, and also of the Celtigars. Crabs in the chat for House Celtigars, because the Celtigars are also a Valyrian house. However, the Targaryens are the only ones who have dragons, and so that's why they have this unrivaled power in Westeros. So the next shot in the new opening sequence is pretty strange. I'm not going to lie, it's pretty weird. This image here, it appears to be what looks to me like a dragon with wings of fire and what I think is a human head. Like, if you look at that dragon's head, I think it's a silver-haired female dead, bleeding head on this dragon's body, which is so interesting because the books do say that the Valyrians did these dark blood magic experiments where they created hybrids that were like half human, half beast. It's also hinted in the books that the Valyrians, or perhaps the precursors to the Valyrians, may have created dragons through their blood magic experiments. There were these animals called wyverns that exist naturally, and they're these big lizards, but they don't breathe fire. So it's sort of implied that Valyrian magic infused these animals with fire and somehow connected them with the Valyrians and with Targaryens so that they could ride dragons. The Targaryens talk about how they are the blood of the dragon. They believe that they literally are related to the dragons. In Season 1, we saw all those murals of humans having sex with dragons. So after all of that setup, and also remember Rhaenyra birthed that stillborn baby, which was scaly. It looked like a dragon. Daenerys in Game of Thrones also births a dragon-like baby named Rhaego, stillborn. So there's a lot of hints that Targaryens like literally have dragon DNA. They are connected by blood. And so this shot in the opening sequence, I think, might show us that. I think this might be ancient Valyrian blood magic creating the Targaryens and creating their connection to the Targaryens, which is what allows the Targaryens to ride the dragons. And of course, that sounds really messed up and wrong and was possibly a terrible idea. Viserys last season told us that the dragons are a power that men should never have trifled with. Dragons cannot be controlled. We saw that at the end of last season when Aemond couldn't control Vhagar, his dragon, and so Vhagar killed Luke, which is a disaster. So it's a nice reminder that this entire Targaryen dynasty was founded on dark, nasty magic committed by an evil empire of slavery. So it's important context to remember that, oh, maybe it's not a good thing that all this dragon stuff is going on. Friend in the live chat says, who's on the left? An attendant? A scientist? Yeah, so I think that's a great question, because then we get this close-up on this man and this woman. And if you're into, like, the deep, dark, nerdy lore of A Song of Ice and Fire, you gotta think of Azor Ahai and Nissa Nissa. Azor Ahai and Nissa Nissa are these legendary mythical figures in Westeros who supposedly defeated the White Walkers last time they attacked by Azor Ahai sacrificing, killing his beloved wife Nissa Nissa. He stabbed her, and that created the fiery sword Lightbringer with which they defeated the White Walkers. Now, a lot of this mythology and prophecy tends to be symbolic in nature, not literal, and so a lot of people think that the story of Azor Ahai and Nissa Nissa might be an analogy, a metaphor for the creation of dragons. So these might be two representations of the same thing. Like, the sacrifice of Nissa Nissa may have been the blood magic sacrifice that created the dragons and their connections to the Targaryens. So that's one interpretation, but all of this is very mysterious, so that there could be other interpretations as well. I do wonder if this blade, this dagger that the man is holding, I wonder if that might be the same dagger that Viserys has throughout Hot D, and which Aegon now has. This mystical dagger that is later used by Arya to kill the Night King in Game of Thrones Season 8. So all of this is very, very evocative. I love how they're paying a little bit of... They're bringing up some of the deep lore. Now, there's also these two on the side. I think that this woman might be Daenys the Dreamer Targaryen. So the way that the Targaryens survived the collapse of the Valyrian Empire in the Doom is that Daenys Targaryen had a vision. She had a dream of the future where she saw the Doom coming. So she said, hey, let's all move away from this place that's about to explode. And so that's why the Targaryens came to Westeros, came to Dragonstone, and that's why the Targaryens survived. You can see there's this castle in front of Daenys' vision, which might represent Dragonstone and moving to Dragonstone. And then, you know, the threads of Daenys' hair in the tapestry then rise up and connect to the Doom of Valyria. When all the volcanoes exploded, the dragons fell from the sky, and the Empire collapsed. So I think that is probably Daenys. So really cool to see that. Then we go through 100 years of Targaryen history in a few PowerPoint slides. These three dragon riders here are Aegon the Conqueror Targaryen, Aegon the First, and his sister wives Rhaenys and Visenya, with their dragons Balerion, Meraxes, and Vhagar. And they conquered Westeros together. So we see this shot, which represents their conquest. You can see that one of these shields is that hand symbol there. That's the sigil of House Gardener. The Gardeners ruled the Reach for hundreds and hundreds of years until they were all wiped out by Aegon and his sisters. And so that's why the Tyrells now rule the Reach. And I think you can also see that looks like a Lannister sigil on that shield, because the Lannisters, along with the Gardeners, were defeated on the Field of Fire, which was this apocalyptic battle where the dragons roasted thousands and thousands of soldiers. And this is, again, important context, because it's like, well, if the Blacks and the Greens, Rhaenyra and Aegon, are going to go to war in this season, this is the sort of stuff that happens when dragons go to war. Thousands of people burn. Dynasties get extinguished. So how many people are gonna die if they can't settle this conflict peacefully? You can also see this castle in this shot, which might represent Harrenhal. Harrenhal is where Larys Strong in the last season burned his own family to death. And during Aegon's conquest, Aegon burned this castle so hot that the stone of the castle melted. And so now Harrenhal is considered this cursed, evil, nasty place, and everyone who rules Harrenhal seems to come to a nasty end. So, this shot is a great representation of the horrors of dragons going to war, and it's another reminder of the evil and the horror that is at the root of the Targaryen dynasty. They didn't become an ancient dynasty by accident. It was by war, and it was by bloodshed, and it was by fire. So Aegon's conquest ended when all the lords of Westeros decided that they did not want to get burned to death. So Lady Shara Arryn and her little son Ronal, along with King Torrhen Stark, King of the North, King of Winter, and Edmund Tully, they all said, all right, we surrender. Don't burn us, Aegon. We swear loyalty to you. And there's some talk about Torrhen Stark later in this episode that we'll get into. Cregan and Jace talk about Torrhen. And there's some interesting stuff about like what Torrhen and Aegon might have talked about when Torrhen submitted to Aegon. So all of that is fun. So then we pan down to the construction of King's Landing. Aegon created the Iron Throne from the swords of his surrendered and defeated enemies. And then we sort of zip through the Targaryen succession of the next 130 years. So Aegon had one son called Aenys, who was briefly king, but that was like disputed by his shitty brother Maegor. Maegor the Cruel was one of the worst Targaryen kings, and he mysteriously died on the Iron Throne. Remember how last season King Viserys kept cutting himself on the Iron Throne, and the disease that killed Viserys began from a tiny cut on his body, cut from the swords of the throne. So there's this really interesting idea that the Iron Throne sometimes rejects an unworthy ruler and kills them. You have to be worthy to sit the throne. And Maegor's death on the throne is the ultimate example of that. And so it's really interesting now when we see Aegon, who's currently on the throne, we see him like reclining, like draping himself over the throne nonchalantly. And of course, when he rules, he is not a wise or experienced leader. So we've got to wonder, surely Aegon is not worthy. Will he become worthy? Will the throne accept him? Will his people accept him? Those are all those important questions. Then we see King Jaehaerys and Queen Alysanne. So we actually saw King Jaehaerys at the very beginning of House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 1, at the Harrenhal Council when the succession was decided. Jaehaerys and Alysanne ruled for a really long time, and they're widely considered possibly the best Targaryen rulers ever. However, Jaehaerys was kind of awful to his family in some ways, but he built roads, he made peace with the Faith, and that's why that 7-pointed star is there in the background. It was also a very prosperous time for the realm, which I suppose is why they have that big pot of gold over there. And we can see Jaehaerys and Alysanne's dragons, Vermithor and Silverwing. Vermithor we actually saw at the end of Season 1. Vermithor's currently living on Dragonstone, and so is Silverwing, though we haven't seen Silverwing yet. So that's one of the advantages that Rhaenyra has in this conflict with Aegon, is that Rhaenyra and the Blacks have far more dragons. In fact, do you want to do a little dragon corner? Let's do a little dragon corner, shall we? So these are the dragons at this point in the conflict. Because Aegon in this episode, he says that, yeah, well, Rhaenyra and the Blacks have more dragons, but we have bigger dragons. Because Aegon's brother Aemond has the dragon Vhagar. And Vhagar is one of those dragons from Aegon's conquest way back in the day. He was ridden by Visenya. And so now Aemond has the biggest dragon in the world, which, as Otto says, is the greatest single power in this world. Aemond has the equivalent of, like, an arsenal of ICBM nukes, you know? He's unstoppable. And so the Greens have that advantage. Helaena has the dragon Dreamfire. We haven't seen her ride Dreamfire yet. Yeah, on the official website, it said that Helaena rarely rides Dreamfire, which I think is kind of lame because Helena's a dreamer. She sees visions of the future, which is sometimes associated with dragons. So I wish we got to see Helaena having a connection with Dreamfire. Maybe we'll get it later. Aegon has the dragon Sunfire, who is noted as one of the most beautiful dragons ever. And in some of the trailers for Season 2, we get to see Aegon riding Sunfire, which is pretty cool. And there is also another brother. There is Daeron Targaryen, who we haven't seen on screen yet. He is the fourth child of Alicent and Viserys. Currently, he's just chilling in Old Town, so we haven't seen him yet, but he also has a dragon. And yeah, the Blacks have Syrax under Rhaenyra, Caraxes under Daemon, Meleys under Rhaenys, Vermax under Jace. Arax got killed last season, along with Luke. Baela has Moondancer. We've seen Moondancer in the trailers. Although at this point in the books, Moondancer is too small to be ridden. It looks like they're changing that. And yeah, Vermithor we saw last season, unclaimed under Dragonstone, along with Silverwing and Seasmoke, and there are some other wild dragons around, so keep track of the dragons, because if this goes to war, those guys are going to be important. So anyway, the opening sequence continues into the Harrenhal Council, and that's when the realm was deciding who should be king after Jaehaerys. Is it going to be the eldest surviving grandchild, Rhaenys Targaryen, or is it going to be the eldest male grandchild, Viserys? And they chose Viserys, which reinforces this precedent in Westeros that it's always the males that rule. It's never the females that rule. And that's part of why Rhaenyra is having trouble getting the throne that, you know, Viserys wanted Rhaenyra to rule, but much of the realm is rejecting her, partly because of this, like, patriarchal precedent that only men rule. In the books, that whole thing's a little bit different. It's actually Laenor Velaryon, not Rhaenys, who's being considered. So it's even more male skewed. But they sort of compressed that history in the show to more clearly explain that the issue here is male preference, primogeniture, males coming first. So then we get to, like, the central conflict of Season 1, which is the Blacks and the Greens. Viserys wanted Rhaenyra to rule, but Otto and Alicent want Alicent's son Aegon to rule. And so the Velaryons sided with Rhaenyra, the Hightowers sided with Alicent, and things got shockingly messy. And this particular shot is like a reminder of that dinner, that supper that they all had together at the end of Season 1, when it seemed like everyone might make friends and it would all be okay, but then Alicent misinterpreted Viserys' last words and sort of chose to believe that he wanted Aegon on the throne after all, and so that's part of what sparked this whole conflict. Although Otto and the Green Council were planning to install Aegon regardless, so maybe Alicent's opinion didn't really matter there in the end. So we see Aegon on the Iron Throne, we see Rhaenyra on Dragonstone, and here they are reaching out to the Lords of the Realm for support, because that's what's happening right now. They don't want to attack each other just yet. They want to actually win some allies and possibly end this without violence. Because if, like, most of the powerful lords all decide that Rhaenyra should rule or Aegon should rule, then maybe the other side will be forced to surrender. I like how the green hand here is reaching out with ravens, because they're sending ravens carrying messages to the lords, whereas the Black Hand is reaching out with dragons, because Rhaenyra sent her sons Jace and Luke riding their dragons as diplomats to try and get the support of the Lords, although of course that ended badly when Luke got killed by Vhagar. And so, yeah, that's what we see in this shot here. That's Arax and Luke getting killed by Vhagar. And then it pans up from the tapestry, out of the tapestry, and shows us, like, the path to the Iron Throne, which I think is a wonderful, like, thematic, symbolic representation of this story. Like, they're showing us, look at all this history, look at all this hundreds of years of history, and look at the blank tapestry ahead of us, the blank pages. It's saying that the events of this story will write new pages of history. The choices that Rhaenyra and Alicent and Aegon are making are writing history. So, like, how will they be remembered? What will their legacy be? We got all those time skips in Season 1 because this is so much about generational conflict and, like, the long-term consequences of choices. So, what will be the consequences of the choices that these characters make? So, I think that this new opening sequence is great. I think it's an improvement on last season's. And so I think that's really fun and cool. And of course, remember that this whole prequel story is taking place 170 years before Game of Thrones, before Daenerys and Tyrion and Jon Snow. And so one of the other fun things is going, okay, what's different between Hot D and Game of Thrones? Like, for one thing, there aren't any dragons in Game of Thrones, so, like, what happened to them? And there's also little things, like, you know, in Hot D, there's a weirwood tree in the Red Keep, but in Game of Thrones, there isn't, so what happened to that? The Hightowers are really important and powerful, and the Velaryons in House of the Dragon, but in Game of Thrones, they're not. And so it's interesting, because we are going to find out a bit about what happened in between those series. So a reminder that we're not going to spoil anything significant from future episodes in this live stream. We're just going to give some extra context, info from books, interviews, and some fun infographics to help us enjoy Hot D. And of course, Hot D is based on a book called Fire and Blood by George Martin. And Fire and Blood is not a novel. It's a fictional history book. And one of the fun things about Fire and Blood is that the historians writing it don't know exactly what happened with Rhaenyra and Alicent. They have, like, these conflicting accounts where, you know, Eustace says that they jailed Lyman Beesbury, but Mushroom says Kristen threw Lyman Beesbury out a window. And so one of the fun things about this show is that it gets to sort of pick and choose what really happened. So even people who have read the book Fire and Blood, they know the big stuff that happens, but they don't know the details. They don't know the why. So it's really interesting to see how the show interprets that. Like, an example of that is, you know, we see Alicent and Kristen Cole having sex this episode. That's something that's not in the book. There are a lot of other rumors about who Alicent may or may not have had sex with. Some people claim that Alicent had sex with Old King Jaehaerys. Some people say that Daemon had sex with Alicent. And there's all these rumors about who Rhaenyra had sex with. So it's all about these, like, scandalous, lurid details and rumors. And Hot D gets to pick its own path through, like, what really happened, which is really interesting, I think. Okay, let's briefly respond to some donations and super chats. So All Sniff Left says, Helena was underwhelming. Her choosing Jaehaera and them killing Jaehaerys could show Alicent's internalized misogyny dripped through. Also, Alicent Cole was sudden, though everything else rocked. Thank you, All Sniff Left. Yeah, so, I mean, I'll talk about Alicent and Cole first, because, yeah, we saw Alicent having sex with Kristen Cole, and, yeah, like, I guess that could seem kind of sudden, but in my opinion, they clearly had an attraction to each other for a long time. I remember in episode 9 last season, Alicent said to Kristen, you know, I want you to go and find Aegon, and I call on all of your loyalty to me and all of your feelings for me. And it's sort of saying that Alicent's like, yeah, I know that you have the hots for me. And in fact, I think it's possible that they they started having sex way earlier in season 1. Because, like, remember when Luke, there was, like, that child fight and Luke cut out Aemon's eye? When that happened, Kristen was mysteriously absent, because Kristen said that he would be on night duty guarding that night, but then he's not around when the kid fight happens. And so then people are asking Kristen, where were you when this happened? And that's really, really similar to what happens this episode, when Jaehaerys gets murdered, and Kristen wasn't there. He wasn't guarding. Blood and Cheese can just walk into the Queen's room, because Kristen, maybe, was meant to be there, but he wasn't. So I wonder if that similarity, maybe just like in this episode, Kristen was busy having sex with Alicent when he should have been guarding. So we don't know how long ago this relationship started. And I like that ambiguity, because Alicent and Kristen have been, I think they've had the hots for each other for a long time. And of course, Alicent says, oh, we can't possibly keep doing this. But they clearly have been doing it for a while. Like, I think it's really funny how, like, right after the cunnilingus, they start casually chatting about the weather, you know? Like, they have a comfort with each other. Like, this is pretty normal, them having sex. So I get the sense this has been going on for a while. Of course, this is extremely dangerous and not allowed, because Kristen is sworn to the Kingsguard. He's meant to never have sex, and he's certainly not meant to have sex with the Queen. They should not be adultering, having sex outside marriage. Especially, and it's especially hypocritical, because Alicent and Kristen both hate Rhaenyra, because Rhaenyra had secret forbidden sex with Kristen, and had secret forbidden sex with Harwin. So this makes Alicent and Kristen incredibly hypocritical, which I'm sure just makes it all the more hot for them. But yeah, this is massively hypocritical. So I really enjoy the bath scene that Alicent has here, when she's looking guilty, she's feeling unclean, and then she goes to church, and there's the irony that she presents herself as like a moral, noble, religious woman who's also breaking the very rules that she claims to espouse. She attacked Rhaenyra with a knife, saying, you just break the rules and you always get away with it. And now Alicent is breaking the rules. So it's so ironic, it's so hypocritical. And of course, it sucks that Alicent has to follow these rules. It sucks that Alicent can't follow her own desires. But she's trapped within this patriarchal system. Last season, Viserys and Daemon were saying that, oh yeah, when we were young, we had sex with whoever we wanted and it was fine. Because this is a sexist system where men are more permitted to have sex with who they want and women aren't. So these are all the themes of gender and power that the show is deeply, deeply interested in. We will talk also about, the Blood and Cheese incident. So Blood and Cheese, these fellas crept into the castle and murdered Jaehaerys Targaryen, who is the son of Aegon and Helena, and the grandson of Alicent. And Daemon ordered this as a way of getting revenge for the death of Luke at the hands of Aemond and Vhagar last season. Now, Daemon did say, I want you to kill Aemond, because Aemond is the guy who killed Luke. But Blood and Cheese go and kill Jaehaerys instead. And I think it's really interesting how it's ambiguous whether Daemon wanted that. Because before Blood and Cheese go in, they're talking with Daemon, and they say, hey, what if we can't find Aemond? What do we do then? And then it cuts to Daemon, and Daemon says nothing. And then the scene ends. So the question is, what did Daemon say? Did Daemon say, if you can't find Aemond, then just leave and do nothing? Or did Daemon say, if you can't find Aemond, kill someone else, a son for a son, kill Jaehaerys instead? We don't know. It's a little bit like in Season 1, when Mysaria told Otto that Daemon made a speech about Viserys' stillborn or dead child, Balon. And reportedly, Daemon said he was heir for a day, and Daemon made fun of Viserys' dead baby. But we don't actually get to see it happen on screen, so it's a little bit ambiguous what Daemon actually said, and whether he actually meant it in the way that Mysaria says. So there's a little bit of ambiguity here, and I think the purpose of that is that it lets us interpret Daemon how we want to. Some people love Daemon. Some people think Daemon's really great and sexy, and other people think that he's an absolute monster. I mean, Daemon did murder his wife with a rock. Daemon took his niece Rhaenyra to a sex club when she was very young. Daemon choked his wife Rhaenyra. Daemon is a pretty bad person. But he's also someone with a lot of interesting emotional layers, and we can still sympathize with some of his emotions, even though he is a horrible murderer. So I think that they're continuing to introduce ambiguity with Daemon to keep him interesting. And that ambiguity is definitely part of the book as well, with its uncertain narration and all of that. But yeah, all sniff left with regard to Blood and Cheese. So in the show, Blood and Cheese corner Helena, and they find her children, Jaehaerys and Jaehaera, and they want to kill the male. Jaehaerys is male, Jaehaera is female, and people can't tell the difference because they're twins. It's interesting, actually. It's like Cersei and Jaime, because Cersei and Jaime Lannister in Game of Thrones, Cersei in the books, she talks about how she and Jaime look so alike that people couldn't tell the difference between them when they were children. Just like in this episode, people can't tell the difference between Jaehaerys and Jaehaera. And Cersei in the books, she thought, like, if we are so similar, why are we treated so different? Jaime gets trained to fight and win glory, but I am being sold off to be married to some man against my will and made to pump out babies, just like Alicent is, and now Rhaenyra is. And so Cersei comments on, like, the twin thing is a really interesting way to show that, like, if males and females, if these kids are so similar, why should they be treated so different? Why do we exist in this gendered world? And so there's something so deeply messed up about forcing Helena to tell Blood and Cheese which of her children is the male, knowing that the male is going to be killed. And so Helena is forced to be complicit in the murder of her child. Like, she's going to feel guilty. Like, Jaehaerys is dead because she pointed to Jaehaerys. I think that's cool. I think that's so dark and twisted, and it fits with that whole theme of gender, which is what this story is so much about. I also think it's fantastic when Helena points at Jaehaerys, and then Cheese, like Blood says, oh no, she's lying. Like, she won't point to the male because the male is more valuable. She must be lying and pointing to Jaehaera, the female. But Blood, Cheese, looks in her eyes and says, no, she tells the truth. And I think that's got sort of multiple meanings, because Helena is a truth teller in the sense that she has visions of the future. Like in this episode, Helena says, I'm afraid of the rats. And then it's the rat catcher, Cheese, who murders her son. Helena is cursed. The actor Fia Saban said in interviews that Helena is like Cassandra in Greek mythology, because Cassandra sees the future and she tries to warn people of bad things happening, but no one listens to her. She tells the truth. She's cursed to tell the truth, but never to be listened to. And it's kind of ironic that here Helena tells the truth, that her son Jaehaerys is there, but the only person who listens is Cheese, who then murders Jaehaerys. So they're playing with all of these dark, twisted aspects of Helena's future sight and the tragedy that no one listens to her. So, but yeah, in the book it is quite different. So in the book, the Blood and Cheese, I'll pull up an image. Blood, Cheese, Maelor. Because in the books, Helena and Aegon have 3 children, not 2. They have the twins, Jaehaerys and Jaehaera, and they also have a 3rd child called Maelor. We haven't seen Maelor on screen in Hot D yet, but in the opening sequence in Season 1, there was a little symbol representing Maelor, so maybe Maelor exists in this show, maybe he doesn't, we don't know. But in the book, Blood and Cheese corner Helena, and they grab her son Jaehaerys and they grab her son Maelor, and they force Helena to choose which of her sons they will kill. And so, obviously, it's horrific, and Helena tearfully says, kill Maelor, because Maelor is the younger one, so maybe it's less awful to lose the youngest child. But then, to be as cruel as possible, Blood and Cheese kill Jaehaerys instead. And they say to Maelor, oh, hey, your mother wants you dead. And then they kill Jaehaerys. So they do the most cruel and twisted and traumatic thing possible. So it's different in the show when they instead just force Helena to identify Jaehaerys. I think either way it's horrific. I think either way it works. And I can understand them not wanting to introduce another child. I'm sure it's difficult to wrangle little children for the filming of the show. So I think it's an understandable choice to exclude Maelor. I do think there are some aspects of the book that I preferred to the show, though. Like in the show, Blood and Cheese have very little trouble walking around the Red Keep at night, walking into the Queen's room, just going upstairs, going into the Queen's room, and no one stops them. And as we said, I think it's possible that that's possibly Kristen's fault, because Kristen, the Kingsguard, is probably meant to be guarding the royal family, but he was busy having sex with Alicent. But it still feels a little bit unrealistic and silly, doesn't it? Like, there's no guards. There aren't multiple guards guarding the royal family in this time of war. Like, come on. So in the book, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit smarter, I think, because Blood and Cheese, they not only use these secret tunnels to get into the Red Keep, but they also climb up into the Tower of the Hand inside the walls to get past the guards. And they can't get into Magar's Holdfast. They can't get into the central, best protected part of the Red Keep where the royal family lives. But they can get into the Tower of the Hand. And they know that Alicent lives in the Tower of the Hand, and they know that Helena and her children visit Alicent each night. So they actually have this clever plan to, okay, we'll capture Alicent and we will wait for Helena to come to us. Because we can't get into Magar's Holdfast, but we can get into the Tower of the Hand. Maybe that's too much detail to bother including in the show, but I like how it shows how it's actually difficult to just walk up to the Queen. And the Greens do have guards and defenses. It's just these guys know how to get past them. I do think it's really fun how we actually see Cheese walking around in the Red Keep throughout this episode beforehand. He actually appears twice. He walks past while Aegon is sitting on the throne, and he walks past the small council room. So it establishes that Cheese is like a common sight, and so it does make sense that people wouldn't be very suspicious of him. And they also showed us rats in the Red Keep, literal rat animals throughout Season 1, which establishes there is a problem with rat catchers. And so it makes sense to have the rat catchers around. Endo says, why did Cheese bring a dog at the start? I imagine the dog helps them sniff out rats. I imagine. I thought it was really funny when a Cheese forced Blood to carry the dog and carry the torch and carry the rat traps while climbing up that ladder. I thought it was quite a funny sort of odd couple pairing between Blood and Cheese, who made a fun duo throughout this while they were committing that horrific atrocity. Although, of course, when Cheese kicked the dog, he instantly lost everyone and everybody's sympathy. But yeah, I thought that were quite fun. Thanks for the super chat from Oathkeeper, who says, do we know who gave the information for Blood and Cheese in Fire and Blood? Yeah, so there are a lot of open questions about Blood and Cheese in the book. So in the book, Daemon doesn't go to King's Landing himself. He sends a letter to Mysaria, the White Worm, and asks her to arrange this. And so it's Mysaria who gets in touch with Blood and Cheese, and then Blood and Cheese go and kill Jaehaerys. And so the book says that, we don't know who the intended target was. Some say that Blood and Cheese were trying to kill King Aegon, but ended up just killing Jaehaerys instead. And it's sort of ambiguous whether, did Daemon specify who he wanted dead, or did Mysaria choose who was killed? And so that's one of those examples where it's sort of ambiguous whether Daemon ordered the death of an innocent child, or if Daemon just told Mysaria to do something and she did the worst possible thing. So yeah, there is ambiguity in both the books and the show, which I think works. But of course, there are going to be conversations in the next episode where surely Rhaenyra is going to be angry that Jaehaerys was murdered. I mean, Rhaenyra is furious that her son Luke has been killed, but Rhaenyra was quite specific when she said, I want Aemond Targaryen. I don't think Rhaenyra wanted innocent Jaehaerys killed. So I imagine Rhaenyra is going to be angry at Daemon. And I wonder if Daemon is going to say, well, I didn't tell them to kill Jaehaerys, I told them to kill Aemond. Not my fault. But I don't think he will do that, because Daemon has a history of accepting responsibility for things that he actually didn't do. Remember last season when Daemon took Rhaenyra to that sex club, and they hooked up a bit, but then Daemon ran off. And then Viserys believes that Daemon and Rhaenyra had sex, which they actually didn't. But when Viserys accuses Daemon of having sex with Rhaenyra, he doesn't deny it. He acts as though he actually did have sex with her, which, I think is partly due to his political goals because he wanted to marry Rhaenyra, and, there's other factors, I suppose. But Daemon does sometimes accept responsibility for crimes he didn't actually commit. Like, he sort of wants people to think that he's a monster. So it'll be really interesting to see how Daemon reacts. I mean, it's very similar to the question last season of when Aemond killed Luke by accident, but then it seems that he's come back to King's Landing and said, oh yeah, I totally killed Luke on purpose. Aemond hasn't admitted to everybody that he killed Luke by accident. And so both sides are sort of admitting more responsibility than they actually did, which is interesting. So all those ideas of like perception and image, the desire to be feared, it's just like how Rhaenyra faked Laenor's death so that people would think that she killed her own husband because she wanted people to be afraid of her. All fun, interesting stuff. So yeah, I think that's my opinion on that change. I think ultimately it's pretty similar to how it's handled in the book. Okay, how about we talk about the North? We went back to Winterfell in this episode. After all these years, we're back in Winterfell. So the episode started with a raven flying through the north and arriving at Winterfell. There are similar shots to that in Game of Thrones of a raven flying into Winterfell, receiving news from afar. And there's a saying in the books, dark wings, dark words. The ravens often carry bad news. And in this case, the raven is carrying the news that Jace's brother Luke is dead. So we get to Winterfell, and we get to see this custom that is going on in this time. So we're told that, during the main series Game of Thrones, the Night's Watch is not respected. And most of the Night's Watch's recruits are criminals who are forced to join the Night's Watch as a punishment. But in this time, the Night's Watch is more respected, especially by the North and by House Stark. So Cregan tells us that in this time, they have this tradition where at the start of every winter, 10% of the Stark household is chosen by lottery and sent to join the Night's Watch, to help the Night's Watch defend the Wall. And the Wall defends Westeros from wildlings and also defends them from White Walkers. They only indirectly talk about cold and death, but they're talking about White Walkers, because thousands and thousands of years ago, in the Long Night, the White Walkers attacked and almost wiped out Westeros. So that's why the Wall and the Night's Watch is important. So Cregan talks about these like Stark values of like duty, self-sacrifice, honor. So that's why the Stark household go and join the Night's Watch, 10% of them. So we get to see him go to the Wall, and then we get to see Jace, the son and heir of Rhaenyra, talking with Lord Cregan. It's cool to see the Night's Watch again. It's cool to see the Wall again. And Jace and Cregan talk about Torrhen Stark. So Torrhen Stark was the last king of winter, because when Aegon the Conqueror turned up, Torrhen faced his armies and decided, you know what? I know what happened to the Gardeners and the Lannisters at the Field of Fire. I don't want to get burned, so I'm going to kneel to Aegon. And there's actually a lot of theories about what exactly happened here. The books talk about how King Torrhen's advisors and family had all these different ideas on what we should do about this dragon guy. Some people said that we should just fight him. Some people said we should retreat to Moat Cailin. Because they faced Aegon at the Trident in the Riverlands, they marched all the way south. Although in this episode they say that they treated on the Wall, which is interesting. But anyway, Torrhen had all these different options about what he would do. His bastard brother Brandon Snow suggested that he should just creep up and murder Aegon's dragons while they slept. But ultimately Torrhen decided to kneel. And so there's different ideas about why this happened. And one fan theory is that maybe Aegon said, hey, Torrhen, I had a dream about a darkness in the north, and I believe that I must unify Westeros to save the world from this cold darkness. And so maybe Torrhen replied, oh yeah, White Walkers, know all about them. That's why I support the Night's Watch. Yeah, that is a problem. We should unite against the White Walkers. And so maybe that is why Torrhen submitted to Aegon. Or maybe he just didn't want to get burned by a dragon. That is also possible. We don't know exactly what happened. But it is really cool to see Cregan and Jace bring up this history. After Torrin surrendered to Aegon, he was forever after known as the King Who Knelt. And so, for hundreds of years afterwards, the Starks were no longer kings, but were just lords of Winterfell and wardens of the North, sworn to the Targaryens. Although in the time of Game of Thrones, Robb Stark decides, nope, we're kings again. We are seceding from the Seven Kingdoms. Targaryens aren't even in charge anymore. So we are now kings in the North instead of lords and wardens. And I do wonder if in the future books, because the book series isn't finished, I do wonder if there might be some renewed alliance between the Starks and Daenerys Targaryen, possibly brokered by Jon. That would be really cool to see. Thanks for the super chat from Ray Day, who says that Tom Taylor got the northern accent down pat. Yeah, so Cregan, the actor Tom Taylor, says that he drew inspiration from Sean Bean, who played Ned Stark in Game of Thrones, because Cregan is a ancestor of Ned Stark and of Sansa and Robb and Bran and Arya and Rickon and Jon Snow, and so he very much embodies that role. I like how he's clean-shaven, though, and Jace is as well, which I think highlights their youth. The books talk about how, Jace and Cregan are both very young men with very heavy responsibilities. There's some backstory to Cregan in the books that his father Rickon died when Cregan was quite young, and so some other members of Cregan's family ruled the North for Cregan while he was young. But once Cregan turned 16 and he was a man, his uncle still kept on ruling, and so Cregan was forced to imprison his own uncle and seize power for himself to take his rightful place as the ruler of Winterfell. So you get the sense that Cregan is someone who's really had to step up, be assertive, assert his strength in order to do his duty, and so that's what he embodies. And it'll be really interesting to see what role he plays in House of the Dragon. So in this episode, Cregan says to Jace that, I respect the alliance of the Starks and the Targaryens, and I want to help your mother Rhaenyra claim the throne, but I also have a responsibility to the Night's Watch, and he also has a responsibility to the North, especially during winter. So he says that I can't send you my full strength, but I will send you 1,000 old men who are useless to me. But they will fight, they will help Rhaenyra, so he sends them south. In the books, it talks about how the North is pretty far away from the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. The North is really big. It takes a lot of time to rally the Northmen and to have them march all the way from Winterfell all the way down to King's Landing. So, especially with winter coming, it might be a while until these Northmen actually get down to help in the war that may or may not be happening. So that's another factor. So, it remains to be seen how helpful Cregan and the North will be, but it's nice to know that you got Cregan Stark. He's got your back. I also like this conversation they have when, Jace is saying, yeah, but you really got to help my mum take the throne. But then Jace trails off and goes silent because he sees the view from the wall, looking beyond the wall, looking at the haunted forest, looking at the cold and the winter beyond. It reminds me of the moment that inspired Game of Thrones. Author George Martin visited Hadrian's Wall. This was in the 90s, I think, and he stood atop Hadrian's Wall and he looked north. And he imagined what it must have been like to be a Roman soldier looking out at this untamed wilderness with these mysterious barbarians lurking beyond. And that feeling is a big part of what inspired George Martin to write A Game of Thrones. And so I feel like Jace is sort of reliving that moment that George Martin had all those years earlier. And Jace is sort of awestruck by what he sees. And so then Cregan talks about Jace's... let me think. Great-great-grandfather, Jaehaerys. So Jaehaerys, as we said, was one of the most respected kings of Westeros alongside his queen Alysanne. And so Cregan tells us that Jaehaerys and Alysanne once visited the Wall on their dragons, Vermithor and Silverwing. And when their dragons came here, Jaehaerys and Alysanne's dragons refused to fly over the Wall. And that's scary because those dragons are some of the most powerful things in this world. Why didn't they cross the wall? And the implication is that, well, maybe the dragons are afraid of this cold in the north. Maybe the dragons are afraid of the White Walkers. And they certainly should be, because the White Walkers have ice javelins, as we saw in Game of Thrones Season 7. And this is based on something in the book. In the book, it's more about Alysanne and Silverwing. And Alysanne says that she was really disturbed that her dragon Silverwing refused to fly over the wall. Silverwing had never disobeyed Alysanne before, so she wonders, like, what awful thing is there beyond the wall that Silverwing is afraid of? Another theory is that there might be magical wards, like, woven into the wall. Because remember when undead Benjen Stark, aka Cold Hands, couldn't pass the wall in Game of Thrones? That's also an idea that's in the book, which is that undead zombies can't cross the wall because there's some sort of magic in the wall that stops them from passing. And so some people theorize that, well, maybe the same magic also prevents dragons from crossing. Although that wasn't an issue in Game of Thrones Season 7 when Daenerys' dragons crossed, so maybe that's not what's going on. In the book, Alysanne also visited a few other locations around the north. She went to the Night Fort, which is the oldest castle on the wall. And the Night Fort is considered to be cursed. There's all these dark legends about things that happened at the Night Fort. It was apparently at the Night Fort that the Night's King took over the Night's Watch and married a corpse queen who sounds like a white. And there are theories that that marriage between the Night's King and the corpse queen might have had something to do with the creation of the White Walkers, maybe. There were sacrifices being made to the White Walkers. It's hinted that the Night's King was a Stark, and there are theories that the Starks might have White Walker blood. We made a video all about this called Ancient Stark Secrets that you should check out. But the point was that Queen Alysanne, like, she visited the Night Fort, and she's like, oh yeah, this is... This is nasty. I hate it. Please get me out of here. And so Alysanne actually sold her own jewelry so that she could pay for the replacement of the Night Fort. She said, yeah, let's leave this awful place. Let's build a new castle. And that is why the Night Fort is now abandoned. Bran passes through the Night Fort in Game of Thrones and finds it abandoned and very creepy, because it seems like the Night Fort is somehow connected to some dark power, possibly the White Walkers. Alysanne also gave the Night's Watch more land. It was called the New Gift. It was a bunch of land that would help the Night's Watch support itself. So, again, like, the book doesn't spell it out, but I think that the implication is that Jaehaerys and Alysanne, they must have known something about the threat of the White Walkers. And so they must have gone, okay, we have to support the Night's Watch, we have to support the Starks, because the White Walkers could be a problem. House of the Dragon Season 1 introduced this idea that Aegon had a dream of a darkness in the north, and that he passed this dream down from king to heir, so that the Targaryens would always remember the importance of helping defend against this darkness. Of course, in the time of Game of Thrones, that prophecy seems to be all but forgotten. In the books, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, the brother of Daenerys and father of Jon Snow, it seems that Rhaegar may have uncovered that prophecy again, rediscovered that prophecy, and that may have been why Rhaegar ran off with Lyanna Stark and fathered Jon Snow. It's a whole thing in the books, which we have also made videos about. But yeah, so Viserys told Rhaenyra about this dream, and so that's part of why Rhaenyra wants the throne, is in order to keep up her duty to help unite and defend the realm against the White Walkers. So, yeah, really cool to see Jace and Cregan together. In the books, there's actually a lot more Jace-Cregan stuff. I was kind of surprised at how short this scene was, because we have this conversation between Cregan and Jace, and then Jace flies home. And so I do wonder if we might get more scenes with Cregan. I'm not sure how much I should describe what happens in the books, because some of it might be mentioned in the show. But to sort of briefly outline it, there are different accounts of what happened between Cregan and Jace. Some people say that Cregan and Jace became best mates, and they hunted together, and they hung out, and they swore an oath of brotherhood and friendship. Septon Eustace, on the other hand, claims that Jace just tried to convert Cregan to the Faith of the Seven the entire time, which doesn't seem very likely. But there's also a rumor, according to Mushroom the Randy Dwarf, There's a rumor that Jace had a romance with Cregan's bastard half-sister Sarah Snow, and there's this rumor that Jace married Sarah Snow, despite the fact that Jace is currently betrothed to marry Baela Targaryen. So that's a thing, and there's also a rumor that Jace's dragon Vermax may have laid eggs somewhere at Winterfell, and there are theories that those eggs might be rediscovered in the future books, possibly by Jon Snow or something, maybe in the Winterfell crypts. So there's all these fun interconnections between the different books. In the book, the alliance between Jacaerys Velaryon and Cregan Stark is called the Pact of Ice and Fire. So that's interesting, because last season, Aegon's dream about, uniting the realm against the White Walkers was called the Song of Ice and Fire. So there are also theories that maybe Jace knows about the prophecy, and that's why it was called the Pact of Ice and Fire. But as far as we've seen on the show so far, we've never seen Rhaenyra talk about the prophecy with Jace. So as far as we know, Jace doesn't know about the prophecy. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But yeah, it was really cool to see ice meet fire atop the wall. And the point is that they have secured an alliance between the Starks and the Targaryens. And that's all great, but then Jace gets the news that his brother Luke is dead. In the books, Jace stops at a bunch of other places as well. In fact, I've got a handy map right here. So in the book, Jace first stops at the Eyrie, and he does stop at the Eyrie in Hot D as well. We just haven't seen it on screen yet. But Jace stops at the Eyrie, which is ruled by Lady Jane Arryn. And Lady Jane Arryn agreed to support Rhaenyra in return for Rhaenyra lending Jane a dragon to help protect the Vale. Remember, in Game of Thrones, the Knights of the Vale were pretty handy helping the Starks win the Battle of the Bastards. So an alliance with the Vale could be very, very helpful to Rhaenyra. And there are also a bunch of lurid rumors about what happened at the Eyrie. Mushroom, the Randy Dwarf, claims that Jane demanded sexual favors from Jace in return for the alliance. There are also rumors that Jane is gay and has a relationship with, I think, Jessamine Redfort might be the name of her lover. So there's sort of rumors swirling around that as well. And after the Eyrie, Jace then flew up to the Three Sisters, which is an island of weirdos near the Vale. Some of the sister men have webbed fingers, like Lovecraft characters. It's all a bit weird. And the Lords of the Sisters did agree to support Rhaenyra, but the sisters are not very powerful, so it doesn't really, they don't matter very much, so that's probably why they weren't included in the show. And then Jace stopped at White Harbor. We haven't seen White Harbor on Game of Thrones, but White Harbor is the biggest city in the north, the only true city in the north, and it's ruled by House Manderley. And so in the book, the Manderleys agreed to support Rhaenyra Targaryen, but in return, Lord Manderley wants his daughter to marry Jace and Luke's younger brother, Joffrey, which is actually kind of important because Luke was betrothed to marry Rhaena Targaryen, and the plan was that Luke and Rhaena would inherit Driftmark, the island of House Velaryon. Now that Luke is dead, it might be an idea to instead betroth Joffrey to Rhaena so that they can still inherit Driftmark together. But in the book, since Joffrey is betrothed to marry a Manderley, Joffrey can't be betrothed to Rhaena. So it's sort of an open question in the book at this point who will inherit Driftmark. And that is one of the questions that is raised this episode when we're talking about Corlys, who is the Lord of Driftmark. And since his family members are dropping like flies, it's pretty urgent to figure out who's going to have Driftmark after him. But yeah, we will get to that. So yeah, after stopping at White Harbor, he then goes to Winterfell and then flies back. So that's what happens in the book. Let's respond to some donations. Ingmar says, I hate it when people say it was better in the books. I feel like they butchered blood and cheese. Thank you, Madison, who says, disappointed in the lack of TB in the wake of Luke's death this episode. Feels like every time we got to sit with their grief, we were thrown back into Team Green, and it felt kind of disjointed. Honestly, that was one of my favorite parts of this episode. So, in this episode, Rhaenyra and her family hold a funeral for Luke, and it's intercut with Alicent at the Great Sept, who is mourning some of her dead. She lights a candle for her mother, Allery Florent, lights a candle for her dead husband, Viserys, and then she lights a candle for Luke. And so I think it's really beautiful how these intercut scenes connect Alicent's grief with Rhaenyra's grief in the same place, the same sept where Rhaenyra and Alicent once held hands and shared their feelings and were intimate together. I think that it implies that their friendship is still alive. There's still a connection between them. Certainly they are both mothers and they sympathize with each other. And I love how there's flame in both scenes. There's the fire of Luke's cremation at Dragonstone, and there are these candles in the sept. It's as though the fire of Alicent and Rhaenyra's relationship is still alive. It's burning low, but maybe it could be rekindled. That's the sense that I get, is that they are still connected despite the deep schism between them. I think that's really lovely. And obviously wonderful performances by all of the actors involved. I like that this Valyrian priest fella is here. We saw some of these Valyrian priests when Daemon and Rhaenyra got married. I love that in this time period, there's this sense of like Valyrian cultural heritage, because the Targaryens are the last of the Valyrian dragon riders, and Viserys and Daemon in particular are proud of their cultural heritage as Valyrians, as are the Velaryons. Which, as I said, is a bit messed up, because Valyria was an empire of slavers who killed a lot of innocent people, but they're proud of their heritage. And so these Valyrian priests who like wear Valyrian glyphs, and you got the dragon keepers who speak the Valyrian language. Daemon and Rhaenyra speak Valyrian together. I love how they have a distinct cultural tradition, which they use partly as justification for their domination of this continent. I mean, politics involves cultural symbols, and so I love how they're leaning into that. And I love how that contrasts with Alicent, because Alicent is not Valyrian. She is someone who worships the Faith of the Seven, and so she has a different kind of mourning. She likes to light candles in the sept. While the Targaryens and the Valyrians, they cremate their dead. They burn them. So there are these distinct, visible differences between the Targaryens and the Hightowers, and yet there are also these like deep similarities. They both, at the end of the day, are mothers who are grieving, and they both have a shared fire. And so, yeah, I thought this scene was really gorgeous. Thanks for the super chat from Christina, who says, excited for your season 2 content. My episode highlight was Rhaenyra and Jace's reunion. Yeah, I thought that was extremely beautiful. So yeah, there is this moment where Jace returns from flying around the north, and he comes back, and at first he tries to play the politician. He is Prince Jacaerys Velaryon. He is the heir to the Iron Throne. So he tells Rhaenyra, I have secured an alliance with Lord Cregan Stark and an alliance with Lady Jane Arryn, and they're going to send us 2,000 men. But then he breaks down crying because his brother Luke is dead. And Jace himself is a very young man himself, and Rhaenyra just holds him in her arms, and they weep together. And it's incredibly beautiful, but it also highlights one of the central themes of this story, which is about the tension between the personal and the political, the emotional and the political. Daemon has a line this episode where he says that the mother grieves as the queen shirks her duties. Rhaenyra can't process her emotions for her dead son and be a wartime leader and a queen at the same time. Her emotional needs clash with political needs. And, Jace is experiencing that as well. Like, he needs to talk about these important military alliances, but he also needs to cry because his little brother is dead. So that's the tension. Viserys also explored this tension really well. Like, Viserys wanted Daemon to be happy and wanted Rhaenyra to be happy. He wanted to please his family and everyone around him. But because he had to make political choices, because he had to choose an heir, Viserys could not please everybody, and so he could not all just get along happily. Political systems constrain the heart, and that's what this show is about, I feel. Also, Jace and Rhaenyra both, I think, feel guilt for the death of Luke, because it was Jace's idea for Jace and Luke to go and fly to the north, and Rhaenyra signed off on it. So I think Jace and Rhaenyra feel terrible for that, and especially considering how Luke was always the vulnerable one. Luke was less confident than Jace was, and he gave Rhaenyra had to give him this pep talk. Where she said that, yeah, no, Luke, you're going to be a great Lord of Driftmark. It's all going to be fantastic. I believe in you. Off you go. And then Luke got eaten by a dragon. And so just the horror of that, I feel like it's really written on Rhaenyra and Jace's faces. Christina in the chat says that she doesn't like how Alicent and Kristen's relationship hurts her character and makes her less redeemable. Yeah, it's interesting. Alicent and Kristen having sex, I mean, it certainly makes them more hypocritical. But I feel like it also makes them more human. Like, there's an honesty to the fact that they are indulging their desires for each other. Alicent's husband Viserys is dead. Is she not entitled to have pleasure in her life? Yes, it makes her a hypocrite, but yes, is she not entitled to love like any human being is? I think there's multiple perspectives that you can take on her. I think it's a pretty natural way to evolve her character, because they could have had Alicent, just never have sex with anyone and always do the moral, religious thing that's expected of her. But I think what makes Alicent interesting this season is the fact that she is going against the principles that she stood by after all this time. I think they needed to bring something new to the character, and I think her hypocrisy in breaking the same rules that Rhaenyra broke, I think it might make her a more interesting, layered, and sympathetic character. But, that's up to you. Like, that's what's so great about this show, is that all of the characters are so layered, and you genuinely can take a lot of different perspectives on them morally and psychologically. So, yeah, I think all views are valid here. Thanks for the donation from Jess, who says that Jace being reduced to a little boy after being the strong heir to the throne reminds me of the scene of Robb and Kat after Ned dies. Yeah. I saw that Alt Schwift X had a conversation with Glidus about this episode, which is available exclusively on Nebula, link in the description. And Glidus was saying that he was reminded of that scene of Robb grieving and crying, and he's trying to be the strong king in the north, but he's also mourning the death of his father. And so George Martin has, always been interested in that clash between the political and the emotional. Okay, what should we talk about next? So we talked about the North. We talked about some of Kragan's backstory and Alysanne. Let's talk about the scene between Rhaenys and Daemon. So, Rhaenys has been helping blockade the Gullet, and as it happens, I've got a handy infographic map right here. Can you believe it? So, this is the Gullet. The Gullet is like the outer lip of Blackwater Bay outside King's Landing. Both Driftmark and Dragonstone are islands outside King's Landing in Blackwater Bay. And so the Velaryons have one of the, if not the, strongest fleets of ships in Westeros. And so Corlys is helping Rhaenyra by using his ships to block the Gullet, to prevent any ships to bringing supplies to King's Landing so that they can't supply Aegon and the Greens by sea. And so to help the ships, Rhaenys has been flying around on her dragon Melis in order to help secure this blockade, which appears to be pretty tedious, tiring work, because Rhaenys flies into the dragon garage after a long day of supporting the blockade, and she says that she needs to rest and gorge, as does her dragon. I enjoy the sort of tired, old, tough lady vibe that we get from Eve Best as Rhaenys. While Daemon just wants to go out again and fight. Daemon says, hey, Rhaenys, you and Meleys, come with me on my dragon Caraxes. We're going to kill Aemond and the dragon Vhagar. But Rhaenys says, I don't respect your authority because I obey Queen Rhaenyra, not you. And so Daemon is again in this frustrating situation throughout this episode where he just wants to act, but he can't because he hasn't got the thumbs up from Rhaenyra. And so you sort of wonder, how long is Daemon going to obey Rhaenyra? And how long are they going to be a productive alliance and marriage? So, yeah, I enjoy the scene with Rhaenys and Daemon. And Rhaenys explains to Daemon that, hey, your wife is dealing with her feelings about her dead son Luke. Maybe you should also be processing your feelings. Because that's a pattern with Daemon a lot. I mean, like, Daemon's brother Viserys just died. Daemon's stillborn child Visenya just died. And Daemon does not appear to be taking a lot of time to grieve. Instead, Daemon is just lashing out at everyone around him and just itching to do some murders. And so Daemon's failure to, like, just address his own feelings seems to be part of why he's such a goddamn monster. I also love the body language here of Matt Smith performing Daemon. I love how, you know, Rhaenys starts talking about feelings to Daemon, and he just looks away from her. Daemon often does this. Like, whenever there are emotions that he can't handle, he just physically looks away, or he looks down at his feet. Like, remember when he faced Viserys in his sickbed last season? Daemon just couldn't even look at his brother, so he just looked away. And so, while Rhaenyra faces her grief head on, Daemon avoids it and lashes out at other people. He lashes out at Rhaenys, he lashes out at Mysaria, he lashes out at Eric Cargill. He pisses off all of his friends and allies in this episode, which is not the healthiest way to grieve, perhaps. So yeah, that's fun. And while Daemon is chafing at the bit, or chomping at the bit, or champing at the bit, I forget the idiom, Rhaenyra is out looking for the body of her dead son Luke. So she goes to Shipbreaker Bay near Storm's End in the Stormlands. This is where Luke died. And just some incredible shots of Emma Darcy as Rhaenyra here, looking utterly broken. In interviews, Emma Darcy has said that Rhaenyra is rigid with grief, and she needs to find a way back to the living. She is so broken by the death of Luke and the death of Viserys and the theft of her throne and the death of her unborn baby Visenya that she just can't function, and so she needs to find some way to work through this. And so she does. She flies to Shipbreaker Bay, and there are a bunch of fishermen who have found Luke's body. And so Rhaenyra flies down, and the common people all run away in terror, which is funny, and also, like, it makes sense because last season, Rhaenys on Meleys murdered hundreds of innocent civilians in the dragon pit. Remember when the dragon burst up through the floor during Aegon's coronation? Maybe these peasants have heard what happened, and they're like, wow, dragons just be murdering hundreds of innocent people. This is bad, better run away, and Rhaenyra shows no concern for these common people. Remember last season, Mysaria said to Otto, hey, you need to respect the common people. You need to respect the 99%. You need to close the child fighting pits. Stop doing atrocities to the common people. And Rhaenyra does not appear to have gotten that memo, and Otto has not addressed the child fighting pits as far as we've seen. So the highborn continue to ignore the lowborn at their peril, I think. We also get a sick dragon dismount by Rhaenyra here, sliding down Syrax's wing. It is not the best CGI of all time, but it is cool, so I'll give him points for that. So yeah, Rhaenyra finds part of Arax's wing. Luke's wing was torn off, and she finds Luke's cloak. So she finds the physical evidence of the death of her son, and she grieves. And yeah, she has lost so much, and she must feel some guilt for the death of Luke, but she certainly also feels fury at Aemon Targaryen for killing Luke. We also get this cool scene with Corlys Velaryon and Alan of Hull. So last season, Corlys almost died in battle in the Stepstones, but he has now finally conquered the Stepstones, which has allowed him to regain control of the Narrow Sea and of the Gullet. And here he is getting his ship patched up again in the shipyards. In the book, Corlys spends a lot of time at the shipyards, and so does Alan, and so does Alan's brother Adam. Alan is played by the actor Abubakar Salim, who you might recognize as Father from Raised by Wolves. And so Corlys and Alan have a conversation. They talk about the death of Luke, because Luke was Corlys's heir. There was that whole messy, bloody, embarrassing struggle within House Velaryon for the inheritance of Driftmark. Remember when Corlys's brother Vaemond came and said, "Hey, Luke's a bastard. He's not a Velaryon. He should not inherit Driftmark. I should." And then Daemon cut off Vaemond's head. And now Luke is dead as well. So what was the point of all of that bloodshed? Corlys has lost even more family members, and it's still not clear who's going to inherit Driftmark. And Corlys is a man to whom legacy means everything. He says history does not remember blood, it remembers names. Corlys knows that Luke and Jace and Joffrey are not his blood. They are not actually Laenor Velaryon's sons, they're actually Harwin Strong's sons. But he doesn't care. As long as he gets a Velaryon on the throne and on Driftmark, he's happy. And so now it's like, well, okay, who's gonna rule Driftmark? And I think one possible answer is, yeah, maybe they'll betroth Joffrey to Rhaena, and so Joffrey and Rhaena can inherit Driftmark, which would have the added benefit through Rhaena. Rhaena is actually Laena Velaryon's daughter. She actually has Velaryon blood, so that might be a good thing, to have Velaryon blood on Driftmark, not have the Velaryon line extinguished, as Vaemond was complaining about. So that's one option, but it's kind of all up in the air. And last season, Corlys did start to doubt his total commitment to legacy and ambition. He kind of finally realized that, oh no, I have been pushing way too hard to get my family on the throne, and it's getting my family killed. But Rhaenys said, no, it's too late to back out now. You should have backed out sooner, but it's too late, so now we've just got to fight this war. So Corlys is, I think, just rethinking some things, but he's a part of this war whether he likes it or not. So then Corlys thanks Alan, because Alan apparently saved Corlys when he was wounded in the Stepstones. And Alan feels kind of uncomfortable. He says, like, oh, I was just doing my job, and then he walks away. So, and he, like, fidgets with his hands. Alan is looking kind of weird and avoidant of Corlys, and we don't quite know why. So I won't spoil anything, but we will find out more about Alan in the future, which is going to be interesting, and his brother Adam. In the book, Alan and Adam grew up together in the shipyards on Driftmark, and sea salt was in their blood, and they started sailing from a young age, and they are the sons of Marilda of Hull, who is a notable trader who ran her own, like, trading business. I think her ship was called the Mouse, something cute like that. And Alan in Hot D, apparently, yeah, he, like, was a veteran of the Stepstones Wars with Corlys. And I like how, we see that Alan has these scars on his face. So he seems like a confident, capable guy, but he has this odd interaction here with Corlys, so we will learn more. Shall we talk about Aegon? Let's talk about King's Landing. So we go to King's Landing and we see that the Greens are building these Scorpion Bolt weapons. Cersei used these Scorpion Bolts in Game of Thrones. One of Daenerys' dragons was killed by one of these scorpions, killing Rhaegal. And in Game of Thrones history, there's the dragon Meraxes, who was killed by a Scorpion Bolt in Dawn. Here's Meraxes, killed in Dawn. So these weapons that the Greens are building can absolutely kill dragons. And since the Blacks have a whole bunch of dragons that could attack at any minute, it makes a whole lot of sense that the Greens are preparing for this. And I also like how they even address like the economic cost of building all these scorpions, because one of the blacksmiths, Hugh, comes and asks King Aegon for more support and more money to pay for these scorpions. It's similar to Game of Thrones Book 2, when the smiths get commissioned by Tyrion to make this giant chain to help them trap Stannis Baratheon's fleet at the Battle of the Blackwater. And the smiths, like, are put in a difficult position because they're just making chains all day and they can't make the other things and they're not getting paid and they can't get the supplies. And, you know, as it turns out, when political rulers make decisions, there are consequences and there are costs and there are decisions that have to be made, which King Aegon is belatedly realizing on his first day as king. And so this Kingsguard guy, by the way, is Arik Cargill, the twin brother of Eric Cargill. And last season, Arik stayed loyal to King Aegon, but Eric abandoned Aegon and instead went to support Rhaenyra, because Eric was King Aegon's personal guard, and he saw all the terrible things that Aegon does, like, you know, going to child fighting pits and abandoning his bastard children there. And so Eric actually took a moral stand. And so these twin brothers are now divided. Arik with the greens and Eric with the blacks. So, yeah, everyone's on edge, terrified that the dragons are going to turn up. But this dragon is Vhagar, so everyone calms down, because that's Aemon's dragon. So we get to see Queen Helaena Targaryen and King Aegon Targaryen, the siblings and married couple in their domestic situation, and it kind of sucks. Aegon waltzes in, and he's looking for his son Jaehaerys. Jaehaerys is sitting there, and so Aegon has to go up and check, like, oh, which of my children is this? Is this Jaehaerys and Jaehaerys? At least Aegon can tell the difference. Blood and Cheese couldn't tell the difference, but Aegon can at least recognize the difference between his twin children. So there's that. However, Aegon does not seem to know much about his children's daily routine, because he's asking, where is Jaehaerys? And Helaena says, at his lessons. And Aegon says, and where is that? Where is it that my son goes all day? It doesn't seem like Aegon's been paying a lot of attention to his children so far. But yeah, he wants to start teaching Jaehaerys. I love Tom Glencarney's performance. Like, some of the faces that he pulls, some of the like physical movements and body language are hilarious to me in this episode, so I'm really enjoying Tom Glencarney. But he's saying, yeah, I want to get Jaehaerys, and Helaena is saying, like, maybe don't. Maybe Jaehaerys doesn't want to be king. Because, of course, Helaena never wanted to be queen. Helaena never wanted to marry her brother Aegon. She may never have wanted to have children, but she's been forced into this situation. And so, understandably, she hates to see her child Jaehaerys forced into this situation. I mean, it's so tragic, this like generational BS that's being passed down and passed down. Because remember, it was Otto who forced his daughter Alicent into politics and like made her marry Viserys. And then Alicent forces Aegon into politics, even though Aegon didn't want to be king. And now Aegon is forcing Jaehaerys into politics. So, like, each parent pushes their child into, like, the same shitty circumstances, passing down the same trauma, the same bad lessons. Like, I love how Aegon encourages Jaehaerys to be a little shit. like Aegon is teaching Jaehaerys to bully Tyland. You gotta wonder, like, if Jaehaerys lived, would he have been as annoying and unethical as Aegon is? This show is all about parenting and about adults passing down their trauma and their bad lessons to their children. But anyway, so Helaena doesn't want Aegon to take Jaehaerys, and he does anyway. Aegon does not respect the wishes of his wife and his queen. And Helaena talks about some of her visions. Like, remember, she has all these visions. In season 1, Helaena talked about the beast beneath the boards, and she tried to tell people there's a beast beneath the boards. Dragon dreams are often vague and ambiguous. Helaena might not know exactly what the beast beneath the boards is, but she's correct that there is a beast beneath the boards, because in the later episode, Meraxes the dragon bursts up through the dragon pit and almost kills the Greens. And so now in this episode, Helaena is saying, I'm afraid of the rats. And so later this episode, it's a rat catcher who kills her son Jaehaerys. And there's also other talk about rats being like, corruption within the keep. Daemon says the Greens are rats. It reminds me of Dune Part 2 when Beast Raban screams rats. But the rats are like a metaphor for corruption, and they're a metaphor for like the schemers in this story. Laris is like a rat. Mazaria is like a rat. All the people who know the secret tunnels creeping through the Red Keep unseen. We also saw literal rats in season 1, and that's why the rat catchers are around. So Helena sees it coming, in a vague way, at least. But no one understands what she's saying, and Aegon does not really try to understand his wife. He just says that, the queen is an enduring mystery, is she not? Which is funny, but also sad that he is not trying to understand Helena. Aemond seems to have a bit more respect for Helena, but Aegon never did. In season 1, young Aegon said that Helena is an idiot. So, it seems like not much has changed in their relationship. Then we see Alicent and Kristen having sex and saying, oh, we couldn't possibly do this again. And then they do have it again the same night. And there are some great shots in this scene of, like, Kristen's white cloak, the symbol of his Kingsguard oath that he's never meant to have sex. It's a similar shot to season 1 when we saw Kristen's white cloak on the ground after, like, just before he has sex with Rhaenyra. So it's so ironic that he's repeating the same treason, the same crime, the same oath breaking with the very person he's been complaining about Rhaenyra with. But anyway, so we talked about that. Oh man, I love when Alicent puts the cloak on Kristen as well, though. Because in season 1, Rhaenyra said that Alicent's righteousness is a cloak. Like, it's fake, it's a lie, it's a mask. And so here, Alicent puts Kristen's mask back on, puts back on the cloak of righteousness, so that they can continue to pretend to be like they have the moral high ground. They can pretend like they're better than everyone else, even though they too are having secret sex. But anyway, we get to the council room, and we get to see Cheese, like, next to the small council room, establishing that the rat catchers are, like, a normal, accepted thing to have walking around the Red Keep. But anyway, we have the small council scene. And Otto has a cool new risk board showing the map of who's who. I think we showed a little bit of this. They talk about how Cregan Stark in the north and Jane Arryn in the Vale now appear to be siding with Rhaenyra. However, the Greens expect that Lord Jason Lannister of Casterly Rock in the Westerlands is going to support Aegon and the Greens. They also have Boros Baratheon of the Stormlands on their side, because Aemond is pledged to marry Boros's daughter Floris Baratheon. They also mention Ormond Hightower. So it's interesting because last season, the Lord of Oldtown, the leader of House Hightower, was Hobart Hightower. And we saw how Hobart Hightower pressured Otto into pushing Hightower ambitions to make Aegon the king. But now, Otto's brother Hobart is dead, and apparently he's been replaced by Lord Ormond Hightower. And so I do wonder, like, is Ormond different to Hobart? Is Ormond also determined to make the Hightowers more powerful at any cost, or is Ormond maybe more chill? It'll be really interesting to see if the death of Otto's brother has any impact on him. I wonder if that makes him question things at all. But anyway, the Hightowers are a powerful house. They're very rich. They have the influential city of Oldtown, which is where the Faith of the Seven and the Maesters of the Citadel are based. So they're very important, although they are not technically great lords, because they don't rule an entire kingdom. They don't rule the Reach. The Reach is ruled by the Tyrells. So the Greens hope that the Tyrells and the Reach will side with them, but they don't know yet. However, Lord Ormond is gathering the Hightowers to support Aegon. So still up for grabs is the Iron Islands, like the Greyjoys. They are currently ruled by Dalton Greyjoy. And in this scene, Orwell suggests that, hey, we should ask if Lord Dalton Greyjoy wants to join us and support us. His fleet would be very useful against the Velaryon fleet. However, Dalton Greyjoy is known as the Red Kraken because he's famously bloodthirsty. The book says that the Ironborn are notoriously fickle, so it remains to be seen whether the Greyjoys will side with anybody. There's also Dawn, which has not picked a side in the fight, ruled by the Martells. And at the center is the Riverlands, ruled by the Tullys of Riverrun. And both the Blacks and the Greens plan to take Harrenhal in the Riverlands to try and rally and gather their strength at the heart of Winterfell. So, yeah, there's a small council scene, and I like how Otto sees Kristen and Alicent arrive at the council together. Maybe Otto suspects that Alicent and Kristen are having sex, which is, of course, a very dangerous secret. If anyone finds this out, Kristen could be executed or tortured to death. Alicent would also be, it would be a scandal for Alicent as well. Actually, another thing I find really interesting about this Kristen Alicent scene is that there's a nice shot of Alicent putting her shoe back on. You'll remember that last season, Larys Strong humiliated Alicent by making her show him her feet and masturbated looking at her feet. And so Larys was humiliating Alicent by using her body and her foot. And so now Alicent is having sex for her own pleasure, and there's this shot of her foot. And so I wonder if it's like Alicent reclaiming her body, reclaiming her sexuality, rather than her body being used by Larys. I'm sure Alicent wants to reclaim her body for herself, but, she's also having that bath later and feeling unclean. So there's a lot of really complicated feelings she's having about sex and her body at the moment, I think. I mean, the whole thing in this show is that the women's bodies are owned by the men. Like, Emma Arryn was cut open and killed in order to pull out the baby inside her in Season 1, Episode 1. Rhaenyra has been frustrated by her body and all of her childbirths that she never really wanted in the first place. And so, yeah, women's bodies and power over them is a big theme of the story. So anyway, that happens, and then we have the small council scene, and Aegon brings his kid Jaehaerys to court, to the small council, and it's very funny seeing Jaehaerys take Tyland's council ball and play with it, and Aegon bullies Tyland, suggesting that Jaehaerys ride him like a pony. And the actor Tom Glencarney said in interviews that he wanted to explore the idea that Aegon is a monster. I mean, Aegon raped that servant girl Diana last season. Aegon leaves bastard children in fighting pits. But Aegon is capable of love and affection. Like, we see that Aegon seems to sincerely like Jaehaerys and his hijinks. I mean, it's almost more it's almost more depressing, like seeing that Aegon is capable of actually liking someone, when you consider how badly he treats most of the people in his life. Like, if only he treated everyone with a little bit of kindness and positivity. But alas, he does not. So, anyway, the small council, they discuss all the different kingdoms. The Lannisters are rallying the power of the Westerlands at the Golden Tooth. And Aemond walks in and says, yeah, we got to take Harrenhal. And Otto and Alicent don't want this. Otto and Alicent want to gather their allies first before they rush into a conflict. Alicent, in particular, is hoping that they can end this conflict without going to war, and without burning thousands of civilians, and without killing Rhaenyra. That's what the last couple of episodes were about last season. Remember the whole thing where, Kristen and Aemond for Alicent, and Eric and Arik for Otto were both competing to get control of Aegon so that Alicent and Otto could push their different plans. Alicent wanted to offer Rhaenyra peace, while Otto wanted to just murder Rhaenyra straight up. And Otto throws shade at Alicent at the council for that. He says that, well, we didn't get to end this conflict because Alicent insisted that we not kill Rhaenyra and that we offer her peace. And so later in the next scene, Alicent complains to Otto and says, hey, you've got to stop undermining me, because if you publicly undermine me in front of my kids won't respect me, my kids won't listen to me, and then how are we going to control King Aegon? Alicent and Otto hope to steer King Aegon and control the realm for the greater good through him, but it remains to be seen whether that will work. Alicent also throws shade at Aemond and complains that Aemond ruined everything by killing Luke. So all of the Greens are like super divided, super fractious. Can they pull it together to actually rule well? I also think it's really like funny and interesting that when Aegon is tormenting Tyland, Alicent gangs up on him, and Alicent says, "Oh well, we'll move on," despite Sir Tyland's interruptions. Despite the fact that Tyland was the victim here, and it was Aegon and Jaehaerys who were making fun of him. So it's such like a crappy pattern of behavior where Alicent sides with Aegon bullying. It's like in season 1 when Alicent told her son Aegon, "Yeah, you can hit your brother Aemond, just don't do it in public." That's what Alicent said to Aegon in season 1. And so now she's continuing to like encourage and validate Aegon's bullying, as long as it's not done to their own family in public. You know, I really feel like Alicent enables a lot of Aegon's bad behavior. It's also funny how, you know, in the throne room scene, we see how Aegon knows nothing about ruling and knows nothing about taxes, and he's just completely unprepared. But, like, you gotta wonder, did Alicent and Otto even try to teach Aegon how to be a good king? Most of what we saw in season 1 was of Alicent hitting Aegon, and of Otto kicking Aegon, and of King Viserys hitting Aegon. A lot of what he's gotten from his family is just abuse, so it's not surprising that he doesn't know how to be a good king, or a good father, or a good husband. Though, of course, that doesn't mean that he's innocent of all of the horrible crimes that he's committed. So, again, Aegon, like the rest of them, is a wonderfully complex, layered character. Thanks for the donation from Jess K, who says that Rhaenyra is undeniably a better mother than Alicent is. Yeah, I mean, we do see a lot more tenderness between Rhaenyra and her children compared to Alicent and her children. In fairness, I think it's fair to say that Rhaenyra's children are a lot more lovable than Alicent's children are. Aegon is a rapist. Aemond is an angry boy. And Helena is difficult to connect to. I mean, Alicent keeps reaching to Helena to try to have physical intimacy with her, and Helena always draws back. So her children are not easy to love, which is not entirely Alicent's fault, I feel. But yeah, I mean, Rhaenyra does seem to have an easier time being a mother. And I think in interviews, the actor Olivia Cook says that Rhaenyra's almost like jealous of Rhaenyra's ability to be a good mother. She's jealous of the good relationship that Rhaenyra has with her children. So that's another element, jealousy between Alicent and Rhaenyra. And of course, ironically, neither of them chose to be mothers when Alicent was married to Viserys and when Rhaenyra was married to Laenor, so it's such a messed up situation. Thanks for the generous donation from Bumper Dump, who says that Laenor is returning to Westeros. How will Corlys and Rhaenys accept this news? Laenor has not returned to Westeros, as far as I've seen. But let's see what happens. In Season 1, Rhaenyra and Daemon faked the death of Rhaenyra's husband, Laenor, so that Rhaenyra could marry Daemon. And one of the interesting open questions is what will happen to Laenor's dragon, Seasmoke. We saw Laenor riding Seasmoke in Season 1 on the Stepstones, and now that conflict is brewing, everyone wants as many dragons as they can get to fight this war. But it's uncertain if anyone will be able to ride Seasmoke while Laenor is still alive, because the books talk about this mysterious magic bond between humans and their dragons, and it seems that a dragon can only bond with one human at a time. So if Laenor is still alive off in the east, will anyone be able to ride Seasmoke? That is an interesting open question. Thanks for the super chat from Josh, who says, how do you feel about the shift in Aegon's character from being a child pit fight watching person who assaulted a maid to kind of likable? Yeah, I think it's very real. I think there are a lot of bad people who are charismatic and who do have some sympathetic feelings and layers to their character. I mean, one of the goals of this entire show is to present us with layered characters and grey characters. I wouldn't say that Aegon is a grey character. I would say that Aegon is a thoroughly bad person because of what he did to Diana and what he did to his bastard children and the child pit fights. But I think that it's very real and very good storytelling to have someone who does terrible things and is also charismatic and is also likable, because there are plenty of people in the real world who do horrible things and are also really charismatic and well-liked. So I love it. I think it's great storytelling. And, Daemon is similar. Daemon has done terrible things, killing his wife Rhea, strangling Rhaenyra. But Daemon is also really charismatic. So I think that's the point, and I think it's great. So, we talked about the small council scene, and I enjoy Aegon and Jaehaerys' antics. And so Aegon and Aemond want to take action, but Otto and Alicent convince them to do nothing for now. What happens next? Alicent has a conversation with Larys Strong. So you'll remember that Larys Strong, the Clubfoot, is the son of Lionel Strong, who was the Hand of the King until Larys murdered him in Harrenhal with a fire, appropriately enough. Harrenhal was burned by Aegon the Conqueror. And this scene is fantastic, because Larys comes up to Alicent, and Larys's whole thing with Alicent is that Larys is helping Alicent by, killing Lionel so that Otto could be Hand, and by trying to kill Mysaria so that Mysaria couldn't spy on her. But all of this, all these helpful murders that Larys is doing is partly about, implicating Alicent. It's Larys getting, dirt on Alicent and sort of getting control on Alicent. And so now Larys comes up and says, I tried to talk to you before, but you were busy doing something or someone. Larys is saying, hey, Alicent, I know that you were secretly having sex with Criston. And the implication is that Larys could hurt Alicent by telling people about Alicent's secret, forbidden sex. So Larys is, acting like an ally to her, but really is threatening her. And Larys says that, as they talked about in Season 1, Larys has now removed all of the people in the Red Keep who were spying for Mysaria, and Mysaria was giving that information to Otto. So Larys said last season, hey, I'm gonna, get rid of those people so that Otto can't spy on you anymore. And Larys says, I've installed my own people. And I think that those new people that he's installed are quite probably Larys's spies. And Larys says he'll, help Alicent, but last season Larys also told Otto, I'll actually help you, Otto, by spying on Alicent. So Larys is playing both sides. He's a lot like Littlefinger in Game of Thrones. He's spying on everyone, turning everyone against everyone else, and benefiting from the chaos. In fact, in the same way that Littlefinger becomes the Lord of Harrenhal in A Song of Ice and Fire, Larys also becomes Lord of Harrenhal by virtue of starting conflicts and BS. I also adore this line that Larys has, where he says that he removed all of those spies from the Red Keep, and they no longer breathe our air. God. He doesn't say that he killed them. He doesn't say that he exiled them. He says they no longer breathe our air, which is the most ominous, creepy line. I love it very much. He reminds me of Qyburn. This is another really interesting relationship. Larys is like the devil on Alicent's shoulder, and I think she feels very much trapped by him, caught in his web. Alicent really has the worst allies. The murderous Larys, the murderous Criston. Let's not forget that Criston, murdered Joffrey Lonmouth, and Criston murdered Lyman Beesbury. Criston is a violent brute, and these are the people Alicent has to work with, so that sucks. And yeah, Alicent has that bath, trying to feel clean. Lady Macbeth in Shakespeare, she tries to wash the blood off her hands, but no matter how much she scrubs, she can't get the blood off. I think Alicent feels guilty for the murders, the death of Luke. She feels a bit guilty for the deaths of the Strongs and the apparent death of Mysaria. She is increasingly involved in lies, murder, and treason, despite her attempts to be the virtuous high lady who's better than everyone else. So it sucks. We talked about that scene. Okay, so now King Aegon takes the throne. Now let's remember, this is what, like, they've all been fighting for all along, right? Like, all of these lies, all of these deaths, it was all to get King Aegon on the Iron Throne, because that's going to fix everything, right? Everything's going to be great once we get King Aegon on the Iron Throne. So King Aegon clocks in for his first day at work as king, and he is flanked by his new friends, Martin Rain, Leon Estamont, and Eddard Waters, Red Ned Waters. These are his new friends, described as friends and flatterers by the official HBO site. And so he mounts the throne, and he takes his first petitioner, because this is like one of the main jobs of the king, is to listen to his people and make judgments and rulings on what happens. And Aegon, to his credit, he's actually quite patient and kind to this nervous peasant. He's like, don't be nervous, I'll help you out. And the peasant says, oh, so you guys took my goats as a tax. Can I have them back? And Aegon's like, oh yeah, taxes are lame. I'll give you your goats back. I'll give you your taxes back. And so then Otto has to swoop in and say, Your Grace, we need taxes to pay for things like, this war and your castle. And Aegon's like, oh, okay. Take backsies. Actually, we need the taxes. You can't have them. So, like, it becomes very apparent that Aegon does not know the first thing about politics or ruling. So what the hell are Otto and Alicent doing? What the hell was this all for? Otto and Alicent hope that Aegon will get bored of ruling, and so Otto and Alicent can rule for him. But I mean, are they going to be able to control Aegon? And I mean, what's the long-term plan here? I mean, Aegon's a lot younger than Otto and Alicent. When Aegon dies, when Otto and Alicent die, who's gonna wrangle Aegon? What's the plan here, guys? So Aegon seems to have some good intentions here. Remember last season there was that moment where Aegon was cheered by the crowd? Because all Aegon wants is affection. All Aegon wants is approval. He's made that very clear. And he does not feel love from his family, so he seeks love from the people as king. And that's why he has suddenly decided, oh yeah, I actually would like to be king. It's actually fun when everyone loves me. It's actually fun to be adored by the masses. And so I think that's why he's trying to be a good king here. But, unfortunately, no one has taught him how to be a good king, and he doesn't know anything about politics, which I'm sure is partly his fault. But we have another petitioner called Hugh who appears. Now, Hugh's actually kind of interesting. Hugh's an interesting fella in the books, as we will learn, I'm sure. In the books, Hugh is described as like this brutish man, but in the show, we learn that he is the father of a sick daughter. That's how he's described on the HBO website. And here, Hugh very politely says that as a blacksmith, he's been building all these scorpions for the Greens, and he needs more money to support him as he's doing this. So Hugh comes across as this quite likable and respectful guy, which I think is that they're taking a bit of a different angle on him than is in the book. But it's going to be very cool to see how they use him in the future. Aegon takes his first petitioners, and Aegon knows nothing, but he is trying to be not terrible. One of the through lines in this episode is, one of the through lines in the show is legacy, like how will we be remembered? And so they talk a lot about regal or regnal epithets. So Aegon was called the Conqueror, Aegon the First, and Maegor was called the Cruel. Jaehaerys was called the Conciliator. Viserys doesn't have a cool epithet. Last season, King Viserys was complaining that, I don't have a cool legacy. I never did anything important. And so, even in the books, Viserys doesn't have, like, a cool title. They call him the Young King to distinguish him from the Old King, Jaehaerys, but he doesn't have, like, a badass name. And so Aegon in this episode, Aegon and his friends, they're going like, what will your name be? Will you be the Magnanimous? Will you be the Generous? Will you be the Strong? Will you be the Dragon Cock? It's all about legacy. Aegon is deciding his. So Larys comes and has a quiet conversation with Aegon. And Larys compares Aegon to King Jaehaerys, which is hilarious, suggesting that Aegon on his first day is as good as the widely revered wise King Jaehaerys. And Larys basically says that, hey, Aegon, Otto is controlling you. Just like Otto controlled Viserys. Which he kind of did. Otto did manipulate Viserys quite a bit. And so Larys is saying, oh, you should have a different hand of the king. You should fire Otto, and you should do things your way. And so I think Larys knows that without Otto, Aegon is going to be a lot more of a loose cannon. So it seems as though Larys is trying to push the realm further towards conflict and chaos, similar to how Littlefinger said chaos is a ladder. He's going to use conflict to gain power. Larys is very mysterious, even in the books. He's this enigma, and no one quite knows exactly what Larys's end goal is, so it's going to be really interesting to see what they reveal about Larys. There are also some crazy theories about Larys, like maybe being a warg, maybe being a skin changer who, like, uses the rats in the Red Keep to, like, look through their eyes and spy. Because one of the interesting things is that Mysaria has spies. There are those children who work for Mysaria and give her information. We know how Mysaria knows the things she knows. But we don't know how Larys knows what he knows. And there were some interesting shots that sort of associated him with the Weirwood in the Red Keep last season. Larys is a strong of Harrenhal, which is next to the Isle of Faces, which is a mysterious island associated with the magic of the Old Gods and the Greenseers. We actually saw the Isle of Faces in one of the Season 2 trailers for the first time ever. So, like, there are some fan theories that maybe Larys has magic powers, like Bran Stark did in the Three-Eyed Raven, but that is just a theory. So, yeah, Larys continues to be a most vexing enigma, as they say in the books. And he manipulates Aegon. Larys is turning all of the Greens against each other, dividing them. And I guess one of the questions is, if Aegon does fire Otto Hightower, who would he choose as a replacement Hand of the King? I think one obvious choice would be Aemond Targaryen, Aegon's brother. There is a history of the elder brother being the king and the younger brother being the hand. And since Aemond is keen for war, that would certainly cause a change in policy. But we shan't spoil his decision. So then we have a conversation between Alicent and Otto, where Alicent basically says, hey, be on my side. Don't undermine me in front of my sons, because I need my sons to listen to me so that we can control Aegon and rule the realm well. And Otto is like, okay, yeah, fine, I'll listen to you, we'll work together. But I think it's really interesting that in this shot, there's this really prominent window. In this dark room, there's this bright window that has like a pillar running through it. Because remember in Season 1, Alicent was telling Rhaenys, yeah, I'm totally going to control King Aegon, and it's all going to be for the greater good. And, you know, since I'm a woman, I can't rule myself, but I can rule through the men, and they're totally going to listen to me. And Rhaenys said, you're kidding yourself. The men will not listen to you. This is a patriarchal system, and you might kid yourself into thinking that you have influence, but you don't. The men are going to do what they want to do. And any illusion you have of having real power is simply a window in your prison. So look at this window in this shot. That is the window in Alicent's prison. She's trying to believe that she will be able to steer the chaotic King Aegon, but I don't know if King Aegon's going to listen to her, and I don't know if Otto is going to listen to her. Otto has never respected Alicent as her own person. Last season, Alicent stood up and said, hey, Otto, you've been manipulating me all my life. Everything that I have ever wanted has been what you wanted me to want. Alicent is trying to assert herself as her own person, but in this claustrophobic political space, will she ever be able to actually spread her wings? Will she ever actually be able to have some real influence? I mean, Alicent is no longer the queen. Alicent has been replaced by Queen Helena. So Alicent is now the Dowager Queen. It's like how when King Joffrey married Marjorie and Marjorie became the queen, Cersei was relegated to the what's it queen. And so she was frustrated by not having power. As soon as the woman has done their job of producing the heir, they are discarded often in this world. Not always. I mean, King Jaehaerys had a good relationship with Queen Alysanne some of the time, and there were some really big policy changes that happened because of Queen Alisane's advocacy. Like, there used to be this tradition of the right of first night, where when people got married, the king or the lord had the right to have sex with the bride. Rape was built in to the political system at that time, and Alisane held all these women's councils where she talked to highborn and lowborn women all across Westeros, and she said, hey, you know what, we need to stop this thing, this right of first night. And so because of Alisane, it was banned. It still happens sometimes in some places, but it is banned. So, of course, this world and these stories are full of powerful women, but the stories have always been interested in, in what ways can women have power in this world, and in what ways are they restricted. And Cersei is, I think, one of the main characters that they explore that theme through. So, yeah, interesting conversation between Alicent and Otto. What else should we say about it? I think that pretty much covers it. Thanks for the donation from Alina, who says, do you think that Aegon is kind to the small folk because King Viserys was a kind king, or maybe just enjoys positive attention? I would say that Aegon enjoys positive attention. I don't think that Aegon liked or respected Viserys, because as Aegon said, Viserys did not like or respect Aegon. Viserys barely talks to Aegon in Season 1. He hits him, never really talks to him. So, yeah, and as Larys says, hey, Viserys was controlled by Otto. You don't want to be controlled by Otto like Viserys. So I think it's all about just getting affection and getting positive validation. I think that's why Aegon is attempting to be a decent king. So, then we had that scene with the Velaryons catching Mysaria. Oh, well, and also at the end of this scene, Otto says to Alicent, hey, you do realize, though, there's going to be a war. Alicent has been trying to not get Rhaenyra killed and is hoping to resolve this conflict without violence. But Alicent is now admitting that, okay, yeah, I realize that there's probably going to be a war. It doesn't look like Rhaenyra is going to surrender. And Alicent says, okay, we'll do war, but it does not mean it must be wanton. Meaning, we should have minimal violence. If there's got to be a war, let's make it quick, let's make it clean, let's try not to get too many people killed. But of course, one of the ongoing ideas throughout these stories is that when dragons are a part of a war, innocent people burn. That was one of the problems with Daenerys's conquest in the end of Game of Thrones. That was one of the problems with Aegon's conquest in the backstory. When dragons go to war, people burn. I mean, we saw Rhaenyra almost squashed a few common people on her landing on the beach this episode. We saw Rhaenys and Meleys kill all those common people in the dragon pit. We saw Daemon stomp on one of his own men on the stepstones. It's messy when dragons get involved. And more importantly, the humans are also spectacularly messy. Aegon and Aemond are so volatile and so angry and so hard to control. Can they possibly be steered to a peaceful resolution, or is there going to be an explosion of violence and more murders like the death of Luke? So, the Velaryon fleet is blockading the Gullet with the help of Rhaenys and Meleys, and so they find Mysaria. Now, so Mysaria is called the White Worm. Mysaria worked in a brothel. She was a friend and lover to Daemon, but Daemon totally screwed her around with his tantrum on Dragonstone when he declared that Mysaria would marry Daemon and would bear his child, and he neglected to tell Mysaria about that plan. Mysaria complained that Daemon was putting her in danger, so Mysaria left Daemon and became a spy master, and she sold information to Otto Hightower, Daemon's enemy. So now Daemon gets Mysaria from the Velaryons, and he accuses Mysaria of, informing his enemies. And Mysaria basically says that, look, I just did what I had to do to survive, and I was only doing it for money. And, Aegon was still going to be king anyway. All I did was speed along the process because Mazaria held Aegon hostage for a little while in episode 9 last season, but eventually gave Aegon back to the Greens. And she's just saying, look, I was just using the Greens for money. I just did what I had to do to survive. Because unlike you, I'm not highborn. I don't have the money, I don't have the power, I don't have the safety that you do. I've just got to do my thing to survive. It ain't personal. Which is interesting. Like, I think it's a good argument, but I think it's disingenuous. Because Mazaria isn't just doing what she has to do to survive. She has goals. Like, she told Otto in episode 9, hey, you need to respect the common people. You need to close the child fighting pits. That's why she held Aegon hostage. She has political goals that she's pushing for. And also, I don't think Daemon knows just how much Mazaria has informed against him. Like, Mazaria told Otto about Daemon's heir for a day speech when Daemon seemed to mock Viserys' dead baby Balon. And that got Daemon exiled. And I don't know if Daemon knows that Mazaria did that. At least it's implied that Mazaria did that. And then also Mazaria told Otto and Viserys about Daemon hooking up with Rhaenyra at the sex club in season 1. And that also got Daemon exiled. In that case, I think Daemon wanted people to find out. But still, like, Mazaria has gotten Daemon in a lot of trouble over the years, and I don't think Daemon knows about all of that, and I think it's Mazaria has been more responsible for some of Daemon's troubles than she admits. So, she last season, Alicent ordered Larys to kill Mazaria in a fire, but she lived. Reports of her demise were exaggerated, so I'm curious to see how she plays out this season. Daemon has her imprisoned and says she's to be treated as a traitor. He is unforgiving. And then he also is unforgiving of Eric Cargill. Eric defected. He left the Greens to support Rhaenyra because Rhaenyra's claim seems more ethical since Aegon's a monster, and Daemon doesn't care and shouts at him and doesn't seem to trust him. Which is really unfair. I mean, Eric is really similar to Jaime Lannister, because, like, you know, just like Jaime, as a Kingsguard, his oath contradicted itself. Like, he swore to protect the royal family, but now the royal family is fighting itself, so how can Eric know which side to choose? It's similar to when Jaime killed the Mad King Aerys, breaking his Kingsguard oath, but he did it for a really good reason, to stop Aerys from burning down King's Landing. Jaime was forever hated as the Kingslayer for the best, most noble thing he ever did. And so that's another irony of morality and politics and duty that they're exploring again with Eric. And yeah, Daemon has no patience for this. So then Rhaenyra finally returns and she says, I want Aemond Targaryen. It's got this incredibly ominous music. Rhaenyra is looking real intense. It's reminiscent of when Daenerys, sees the death of Missandei before Daenerys burns King's Landing. So we've got to wonder, like, is Rhaenyra going to do something drastic like Daenerys did? How is Rhaenyra similar to Daenerys, and how is Rhaenyra different to Daenerys? Rhaenyra just says, I want Aemond, because Aemond killed Luke. But she's not very specific about how she expects to get Aemond. I don't know if she approved of Daemon going on a mission to have Aemond assassinated, let alone having Jaehaerys assassinated. So it'll be cool to see what her reaction to all of this is. Thank you for the donation from Alt Shift Waters, who is hunting for rats in the Red Keep. And thank you, Zach, who says, why do you think Blood and Cheese asked Helena which of her children was the boy instead of checking to make sure? Well, yeah, I mean, Blood and Cheese could have just, looked at the kids' bodies to know which one was the male. But I think the point from a storytelling perspective was forcing Helena to choose. Because forcing Helena to choose which of her children would die is horrific and traumatic and makes it dramatic. And it also highlights the theme of gender and, like, the weirdness that males are worth more. And the irony that since Jaehaerys is worth more, he dies and Jaehaera lives. So I think those are some of the reasons. Thank you, Jess, who says, do you think Rhaena is now going to want revenge against Aemond for killing her betrothed? Yeah, I enjoyed how at the funeral for Luke, there was a nice shot of Rhaena looking very upset at the death of Luke. We did see some nice moments between Rhaena and Luke. Like, when Luke was uncertain about being the Lord of Driftmark, Rhaena said, hey, you'll do great. Because Rhaena and Luke were betrothed to marry. They were going to rule Driftmark together. And so she's really sad to lose him. And it's also like what is Rhaena's future now? Because, by marrying Luke, Rhaena was going to rule Driftmark, which is, her ancestral home on her Velaryon side. And so now it's like, well, what is her future? What is her identity? I mean, Jess asks, will she want revenge against Aemond? I don't know how much power Rhaena has to get revenge. Because Rhaena's twin sister, Baela, has a dragon, Moondancer. Maybe she could get some revenge, but Rhaena does not have a dragon. And she does not have an army. She does not have a clear political power right now. So, will Rhaena be able to do anything for her betrothed Luke? Will Rhaena marry someone else? Perhaps Joffrey Velaryon? A lot of open questions that I find really interesting. It's also heartbreaking that we see the younger brother Joffrey holding a little horse toy. Because we saw this horse toy back in Season 1. It's Luke's horse toy. And we saw that toy at a moment of real sort of vulnerability from Luke, where he was telling Corlys, I don't want to be the Lord of Driftmark. And so it's just so sad that this is one of the few things that they have left of Luke, is this little toy at this moment of vulnerability. And now Joffrey is holding it. So it's like, God, what's going to happen to Joffrey now? Is he going to be the next to die? In the book, it's actually kind of funny. They say that Joffrey, when Joffrey learned that his brother Luke was dead, Joffrey swore a terrible oath of vengeance against Aemond and Boros. And they actually had to stop Joffrey from running and jumping on his dragon and flying off on his dragon to get revenge on Aemond and Boros. Because little Joffrey does have a dragon of his own, Tyraxes. Quite a small, young dragon, but a dragon nonetheless. It seems as though Joffrey is a bit younger in the show, so I'm curious to see what they're going to do with him. But God, it's sad, this death of Luke. So we also spoke about these funerals and how they parallel each other. Rhaenyra's funeral for Luke and just Alicent in the Sept mourning her dead. It was interesting to learn more information about her mother, Allery. In the book, we don't know much about Alicent's mother, but in the show, it's revealed that her name is Allery Florent. And in behind-the-scenes interviews and stuff, they've said that Allery was very religious. And so part of the reason why Alicent has this deep connection to her faith is that her mother, taught her that religion. And after her mother died of an illness, religion is part of how Alicent feels connected to her mother, which is lovely. It's interesting that Alicent also lights a candle for Viserys. Viserys, in a lot of ways, was terrible to Alicent. Viserys married Alicent when she was very young. Viserys had sex with Alicent when she didn't want to have sex. The actor described it as marital rape. And Viserys' bad choices led to this conflict and led to this war. Viserys was also a pretty bad father to Alicent's children, as far as we saw. So Viserys was pretty bad to Alicent in a lot of different ways, but Alicent nonetheless seems to hold some love for her dead husband and lights a candle for her, as well as lighting a candle for Luke, which I think is a lovely way of showing the shared grief and the shared motherhood and the possibility of reconciliation. So then we have a scene between Aemond and Criston. Aemond and Criston are frustrated that Otto and Alicent are doing nothing, and they want to go out and fight the bad guys and win this war. Criston and Aemond are both people who have always used violence to assert themselves. Criston was a lower-born person. He's not a high-born like all these bloody Targaryens. He had to fight his way up through tournaments and through battling in the Dornish marches. Violence has always been his path to social mobility, and so he wants to keep fighting. And Aemond is the second son of Viserys and Alicent, and so he's always had to fight to get a moment in the spotlight because his big brother Aegon overshadows him. Aegon gets to be king because he's older, so Aemond has to fight to get renown. It's the second son theme that we've seen between Viserys and Daemon and between Corlys and Vaemond, which is really fun. And so both of them want to get out there and prove themselves. They specifically talk about the Crown Lands. So the Crown Lands is the area around King's Landing. And there's a lot of small, minor houses in this area, many of which are supporting Rhaenyra. Last season they mentioned houses Celtigar, Staunton, Massey, Darkland, Bar Emmon. And now Criston and Aemond mention Rosby and Stokeworth. In Game of Thrones, Bronn almost married a Stokeworth woman, which was funny. But, they want to go out and fight some of these Crown Lands lords and bang some heads together and start winning this war. But Otto comes in and says, don't make plans without me. It's also really funny, Aemond criticizes Alicent for, having love for the enemy and for starting this war and for blaming Aemond. Aemond feels really frustrated and, he hates this disapproval from his mother. But Criston kind of defends Alicent and says, no, Alicent got sucked in by Rhaenyra because Rhaenyra is such an intoxicating spider. Criston is still mad that Rhaenyra had sex with him, then rejected him. I wonder if Alicent will ever reject Criston, and I wonder how Criston might react to that. Of course, Criston also looks kind of sheepish and uncomfortable here talking to Aemond because Criston is currently having sex with Aemond's mother. I wonder how Aemond would feel if he found that out. There are so many dangerous, explosive secrets going on here. So, Aemond and Criston are natural allies, but there are secrets between them. So then Otto walks in, and he doesn't want people making plans without him. I think that Otto does some quite clever psychological manipulation of Aemond here. Otto says that, oh, well, you're so powerful because you've got Vhagar, and there are many pieces at play, some of which you can't see. Otto is implying that I know things that you don't, so you better listen to me because I'm really in control here. And Otto also says, you're not impulsive like your idiot brother Aegon. You're the smart one, so you're going to listen to me. It's very manipulative, I think. Otto manipulates Aemond, similar to how Otto has manipulated Alicent. But how long will Aemond continue to listen to Otto? Remains to be seen. Aemond also says words are wind in this scene, which is one of George Martin's favorite phrases in the books. One character says that the wind from Manderly's mouth means no more than the wind escaping from his bottom. So it does indeed turn into fart jokes sometimes. So anyway, Aemond and Criston hope to go out and use Aemond's giant fire-breathing dragon and Criston's brand of delicate, gentle diplomacy to convince some of the Lords of the Crown Lands to support Aegon instead of Rhaenyra. So finally, let's talk about the blood and cheese situation. John in the super chat says, hello, Shift. Did everyone know that they can donate to your favorite YouTuber using the link below? That's right, John. I very much appreciate all of your generous super chats. But when you super chat, YouTube takes a large cut. What you can do alternatively is donate via Streamlabs. If you use the link in the video description below, you can donate without YouTube taking a large chunk of it. So I really appreciate all of your kind donations, and if you'd like to donate, it is better to use the Streamlabs link. And I will try to answer as many of your questions as I can. We'll save most of the donations and your questions towards the end of the stream, but I appreciate them. Thank you. So Daemon puts on his murder cloak. Daemon put on his murder cloak a few times. Whenever he's up to no good, he puts on a hoodie, a no good hoodie, a mischief robe, a skullduggery cloak, and last time he put one of those on. I mean, one time he killed his wife Rhea with a rock when he was wearing his hoodie. He took his niece to a sex club when he was wearing that hoodie. Daemon just loves going out and doing bad things. So after Rhaenyra said, "Get me Aemond," Daemon goes and tries to have Aemond assassinated. So he goes into the Red Keep and he's let inside King's Landing by this Gold Cloak, this member of the City Watch. Because you remember that Daemon was once the commander of the City Watch. Daemon gave the Gold Cloaks their gold cloaks. Daemon held orgies for his fellow Gold Cloaks. I guess they thought he was a good boss. Daemon used the Gold Cloaks as his personal army on Dragonstone. So many of them, after all these years, are still loyal to him. So he uses a loyal Gold Cloak who he bribes to get inside King's Landing. And then he finds this rat catcher called Cheese. And I enjoy the fact that Cheese is currently eating cheese. I'm reminded of Charlie Kelly, who was also a rat catcher in It's Always Sunny. And Cheese is apparently... Cheese was referred to Daemon by Mysaria. Because Mysaria also has friends in low places. It is kind of interesting that, Larys says this episode that I have removed all of the spies in the Red Keep who were feeding information to Otto through Mysaria. But then Cheese is still working in the Red Keep, and Mysaria knows Cheese. So I wonder, did Larys fail to realize that Cheese is working for Mysaria, or knew Mysaria, or was connected to Mysaria? Or did Larys know that Cheese was connected to Mysaria and allowed him to stay anyway? I think it's an interesting possibility that Larys might actually maybe be working with Mysaria a little bit, not just against her, because, Larys seems to constantly play both sides. Wouldn't it be cool if we got a scene later on where, Larys and Mysaria are hanging out, revealing that they actually have been cooperating to some extent? That might be interesting. If Larys's goal is to make this conflict worse, then helping or allowing the assassination of Jaehaerys by Blood and Cheese might fit with his goals. Kind of interesting, huh? So, Daemon wants Cheese to go and kill Aemond, and Cheese is a good person to know because Cheese knows Maegor's secret tunnels through the Red Keep. When Maegor the Cruel had the Red Keep built, he had all these secret tunnels, these escape passages, these little ways through these secret ways through the keep built. And then Maegor the Cruel had all of the builders and architects murdered so that no one would ever know his secret tunnels. In Game of Thrones, Varys knows about the secret tunnels. In House of the Dragon, Daemon and Rhaenyra and Eric and maybe Rhaenys know about the secret tunnels. It's obviously pretty handy to have a secret way to get into the royal family's home. So Daemon gets Cheese to go in with Blood to go and kill Aemond. Cheese brags that he knows the secret tunnels better than the shape of his own cock, which is a weird flex. But that line is taken straight from the books. That's a line by Mushroom the Randy Dwarf in the book. So Blood is this gold cloak who Daemon sends in to help Cheese. Because Daemon, in a rare moment of respect for other humans, Daemon says that, Aemond is actually a pretty good fighter, so you're going to need to be careful with him. You're going to need help. I don't know if Daemon's ever been that complimentary of one of his enemies before. In the book, Blood is an ex-Gold Cloak who was fired for beating a woman to death in a drunken rage. So, these are some bad people who Daemon is working with, doing bad things. Are we the baddies? So, it's nasty. And so Blood and Cheese infiltrate the Red Keep. And we talked about this interesting moment where Cheese says, what if we can't find Aemond? And then we don't see Daemon's reply. So we don't know if Daemon said, if you can't find Aemond, just kill Jaehaerys instead, which would be horrible, approving the murder of a child. We don't know whether he signed off on that or not, which is interesting. So yeah, Blood and Cheese, they go in, and Cheese makes Blood carry the dog up the ladder along with the torch and the rat traps, which is quite funny. And then they sneak into the Red Keep, and we get this fun scene where Aegon's flatterers are discussing what his epithet should be. They suggest that Aegon's title should be Aegon the Magnanimous or Aegon the Generous, and then they ask for more wine. So I think the implication is that these guys are enjoying getting free stuff. They're sucking up to Aegon so that they can use his power to their own material advantage, you know? So it's an interesting dynamic. You know, Aegon is so desperate for love that he's accepting affection from people who maybe don't actually care about him that much. It'd be interesting to see if they do anything more with these characters. Martin and Leon and Red Ned are his friends and flatterers. We also see this statue being carved of King Viserys over here, because in this time, in the throne room, there are these big statues of all the Targaryen kings. I suppose Robert Baratheon might have had those removed after his rebellion, because he didn't want any Targaryen kings looming over his Baratheon dynasty. So King Aegon and his flatterers ignore Blood and Cheese walking through the keep because they are the official rat catcher, Cheese is. And also I think there's the general theme of the Highborn constantly ignoring and underestimating small folk. They are just ignored a lot of the time, and that can be a bad thing for them, but it can be a good thing for them. So we see an actual rat. There are a lot of rats. There is a funny bit at one point in the book where Otto decides that we've got to get rid of these rat catchers and we'll introduce a lot of cats instead. I think Otto buys like 100 cats to eat the rats in the Red Keep, which is funny because in the time of Game of Thrones, the Red Keep is then plagued by cats. Remember, there's that scene in Season 1 of Arya chasing cats, and there is a particular cat who has a storied history, a one-eared black tomcat who I think goes by the name of Balerion, who may have been the kitten of Elia's daughter, Princess Rhaenys. There's a whole cat family tree that we could get into, because Sir Pounce, I think that Sir Pounce, Tommen's kitten Sir Pounce, might actually be the kitten of Balerion, who was Princess Rhaenys' cat. But that's a theory for another time. We're going to have to do a cat video at some point. But yeah, the Red Keep is plagued by cats at the time of Game of Thrones, and so I wonder if they're going to have to introduce some dogs to chase off the cats that were introduced to chase off the rats. Maybe they just need to stop eating so much cheese in the Red Keep, huh? Anyway. So Blood and Cheese creep through the Red Keep, and no guards stop them, which might be because the King's Guard, Kristen, is busy having sex with the Queen, Alicent. And so there's a bit of conflict between Blood and Cheese. These guys are clearly both doing it for money. Like that, like they have no like personal stake. They don't care about what Aemond may or may not have done. They don't really care about Daemon personally that much. So maybe it was a bad idea to send these, sellswords in who have very little stake in this being pulled off well or properly. But that's what Daemon did. I mean, if Daemon is such a brave fighter who knows the tunnels, why didn't Daemon just do this himself? Daemon decided not to take the risk himself, huh? In the book, Daemon doesn't come here personally. He sends a letter to Mysaria, and she arranges it for him, so it's a little bit different. But yeah, Cheese kicks the dog and loses our sympathy. I like how Blood scoops up all of the coins from this map. Just showing he's doing it from the money. And there's also a really nice shot where Cheese looks at this mural of the burning of Harrenhal. This also appeared in the opening sequence, where Aegon the Conqueror burned Harren the Black alive in his castle, which is a good reminder of, this is what the Targaryens do to their enemies. If you mess with Targaryens, you get roasted. So I like seeing Cheese's fear here, and it's also a reminder of the curse of Harrenhal. Both Aemond and Daemon plan to go and capture Harrenhal, they say. So reminding us of the dark history of Harrenhal is, I think, a really good setup to seeing Harrenhal later on this season. So Blood and Cheese find Helena and her children Jaehaerys and Jaehaera, and they force Helena to identify which of her children is the male, because they say, Daemon said, a son for a son. Now, we don't get to see Daemon say a son for a son to Blood and Cheese. So again, it's ambiguous what Daemon's instructions were to Blood and Cheese. But they need to kill the son, so they force Helena to choose. And we did talk about this already a bit. And there is this sort of tragic moment where Cheese recognizes that Helena is telling the truth when she points to her son. Like, it's so messed up that there's a moment of almost like actual human understanding between Helena and Cheese right before he murders her little innocent son. It's dark. And we talked earlier about how this is a little bit different in the book, where in the book they instead force Helena to choose which of her sons to kill, because Helena has another son in the book. So it's all a bit of a cock-up, because they were meant to kill Aemond, who was actually guilty of killing Luke. They were not meant to kill Jaehaerys, as far as we know. And this is a much more reprehensible crime. Killing an innocent little kid like Jaehaerys. And of course, we saw how King Aegon has some affection for Jaehaerys, so Aegon's going to be furious. Alicent is going to be furious. As far as Alicent knows, Rhaenyra ordered the death of her grandson Jaehaerys. So this death is going to make this conflict worse, obviously. The death of Luke and now the death of Jaehaerys could really make things even darker. And so any hopes of trying to have some peace seem to disappear. Helena runs off. She doesn't scream. It would probably be helpful to scream to get some help, but it reminds me of how Helena reacted to the death of Vaemond in Season 1. Helena sort of clammed up and froze up and went quiet. She was like overwhelmed, overstimulated. So this seems like a similar reaction here. She just grabs her daughter, Jaehaera, and runs to her mother's room, which is, it's so sad seeing. That's what she does. She runs to her mother, of course. It makes her seem so vulnerable and childlike. And so she runs to her mother, and she finds her mother having sex with Kristen Cole. Helena doesn't react to that. She's got bigger things to worry about with Jaehaerys dead. Although I wonder if Helena might even have seen Alicent having sex with Kristen before. I don't know. Maybe it's like an open secret with them. We don't know. But Helena just sort of numbly says they killed the boy. And the final shot of the episode is Alicent's face, learning that her grandson has been murdered, just like the previous season ended with Rhaenyra's face, learning that Luke had been murdered. So now they're sort of on equal footing. They've both lost an innocent life, and they both are furious. And this could be the spark that turns this war of quills and ravens into a war of blood and fire. So things are gonna get nasty. Okay, I think that's all of the main things that I wanted to say. I did think that it's funny that Aegon makes another joke about how his nephews, Jace, Luke, and Joff, are Strongs, because his friends are saying, you should be called Aegon the Strong, and Aegon's like, no, my nephews are the Strongs, because they were fathered by Harwin Strong, and so that's what makes them bastards and illegitimate. Because, let's not forget that Rhaenyra kind of created this mess by having bastard children with Harwin Strong. It's just like when Cersei had bastard children with Jaime, and then Ned had to say, hey, Joffrey's not legitimate. I mean, Rhaenyra kind of is the Cersei in this situation. Although Alicent is also like Cersei, so again, it's very morally complicated. But yeah, I enjoyed Aegon's strong joke. And yeah, we talked about the opening sequence. So yeah, I think we've covered most of what I have to say for now. So now I'm going to answer as many of your super chats and donations and questions as I can until my voice goes. So let's do that. Hell yeah. So thank you for all your kind donations. Thank you for the donation from Jim Filbert, who says, Tyrion said the strangest thing he'd ever eaten was Dornish women. Do you think Dornish men say the same about Andal women? I am sure there are all sorts of dirty jokes being made. Thank you, Daniel Roscoe, and thank you, DWI Hokkaido, who says, Hi, Notglitus, love from Indonesia. Could you please tell us what happened between you and Custard? I think you might be getting me confused with my evil half-brother, Alt Schwift X. I believe Alt Schwift X had an altercation with some Custard which was traumatic to everybody involved. So you're going to have to ask AltSwiftX about that. Thank you, Bars and Bolts. Rachel says, thoughts on No Maylor? So, yeah, in the books, Aegon and Helena have 3 children, Jaehaerys, Jaehaera, and Maelor. Maelor does appear in the Season 1 family tree. There is a little symbol for Maelor, so I guess Maelor exists in this series, but we haven't seen him yet. So, I don't know, maybe Maelor is in Old Town with Daeron, Alicent's 4th child. You know, I could understand if they decided to cut Maelor and not include him in the story. That would not break my heart. I think people are confused enough by all the characters in this story as it is. So, yeah, I don't think it's a disaster if they cut him, but we'll see what happens. There could still be a role for him. James says, why is Aemond mewing? Brodex also asks about Maelor, and Pietro says that the intro animation is actually legible. Still don't like the Game of Thrones theme, though. Yeah, I do like the new tapestry-style opening sequence. I think it's cool. I think it's way easier to understand than the grey Bloodline City opening sequence from last season. It would be cool if they made a new opening theme song to give House of the Dragon its own identity. But I understand that the classic Game of Thrones theme is so iconic and beloved that, you know, I can see why they decided to keep it. But, I mean, come on. Like, if they asked Ramin Djawadi to, like, make a new bop, I'm sure he could and would. So, you know, some new music would have been cool. Thanks, Kaios. Yeah, we talked about how interesting it is that Aegon really does seem to like his child, Jaehaerys. And so it's going to be interesting to see how Aegon reacts to the death of Jaehaerys. I mean, I wonder if Aegon will show Jaehaera any affection, his surviving child, and Maelor, if Maelor exists. Or is Aegon just going to go full into rage and revenge? We shall find out. Thanks for the donation from Alison, who says, thank you for your content and bravely staying up late into the night for these streams. Thanks, Alison. Ray Day says, give Emma Darcy all the awards. Yeah, I think Emma is doing a great job playing Rhaenyra. Jarek says, now that you've met and talked with George R.R. Martin after years of putting out content on his works, do you feel like you've made it? Yeah, Glidus and I met George R.R. Martin, and it was great. And he bought us burritos. And yeah, it kind of does feel like making it. When I started making Game of Thrones videos, I did not expect that George Martin would buy me a burrito one day, but that is what happened, and it was great. So, yeah, it's been fantastic these last 10 years, and I'm really grateful to everyone who watches the videos and has made this possible. I really appreciate the support, and I really appreciate everyone else who's been supportive over the years, which includes lots of great people in the Ice and Fire community and lots of other folks. And I'm also grateful to George for the burrito. Thank you, Scott, who says, good to be back. We didn't see a body. Yeah, no, that's a good point. So last season, Luke was killed, seemed to have been killed, but we never saw a body. So is it possible that Lucerys Velaryon is still alive somewhere? In the books, there are all these different rumors and stories about what might have happened, and some people in the book claim that Luke actually miraculously survived, and he washed up in Shipbreaker Bay, and he lived for the rest of his life as a simple-minded common person, and Luke secretly is still alive. That would be cool. I don't think it's likely, but it would be cool. But again, it is cool how this story continues to play with rumor and different possibilities and what might have really happened. RW says, did you expect them to name Blood and Cheese? Yeah, so in the book, the people who killed Jaehaerys are named Blood and Cheese, or they're referred to as Blood and Cheese. They weren't called Blood and Cheese in this episode. Yeah, maybe they'll use those names later. But, you know, I don't know if they're going to be talking about Blood and Cheese so much as they're going to be talking about let's murder the Blacks as revenge for the death of Jaehaerys, you know? But it will be really interesting to see what the fallout will be. Gabe says, will Daeron appear? Yeah, so Daeron is the fourth child of Viserys and Alicent, and the showrunner Ryan Condal has insisted in interviews that Daeron does exist, and he's in Old Town, and he is part of the story. So I think we can expect Daeron to appear at some point, but whether he'll appear in Season 2 or Season 3 or what, I don't know. Thank you, Malcolm, who agrees about blood and cheese, and thank you, Dolorous Ted, who says that the whole episode was like Hitchcock's Under the Table Tomb, but for kid assassination. I've got to watch more Hitchcock. Thank you, Handsome Squidward, who says, thrilled by the return of Daemon's up-to-no-good hood. Yeah, I wonder what other mischief and skullduggery Daemon will get up to in his hood this season. Awald says, I loved it when Bloody Cheese said, it's bloody cheesin' time, and then bloody cheesed all over the place. I wish I could unread that sentence. Well, it was really funny that, like, we've done videos talking about Dunk and Egg. There's actually a new Game of Thrones spin-off show being filmed right now about the adventures of Dunk and Egg. It's a kind of prequel series of short stories that is set in between House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. We've made videos about all of the Dunk and Egg books, which you can watch at youtube.com/AltShiftX. And so we keep saying, you know, Dunk and Egg, Dunk and Egg, Dunk and Egg. And in the comments, apparently someone thought that every time we said Dunk and Egg, we weren't referring to the two characters, Dunk and Egg. We were actually referring to one character whose name was Duncan Egg. You know, Sir Egg. First name Duncan, last name Egg. Which I thought was really funny. But yeah, no, there's no one in this show called Bloody Cheese, unfortunately. But it certainly was bloody cheesing time. Thank you for the super chat from breaking out the Bordeaux and charcuterie board. Yeah, cheese is never going to be the same. I swear, we're never going to look at cheese the same way after this murder. Jess K says, I think it would be neat if House Celtigar got a half-dragon, half-crab hybrid. Yeah, so House Celtigar are a Valyrian family. Celtigars are kind of cool in the books. The Celtigars have a Valyrian steel axe, if I'm not mistaken, and they also are said to have a magic horn that can summon monsters from the deep, which would be handy. Do you think we're going to see Bartimus Celtigar's magic horn this season? And yeah, I mean, look, half dragon, half crabs. I mean, there are theories, right? Because in the Game of Thrones books, Euron Greyjoy talks about when the kraken weds the dragon, let all the world beware, which has led to some harebrained theories about some kind of half dragon, half squid hybrid monstrosity rising from the depths after Euron Greyjoy's blood magic sacrifice, which you can learn all about in the AltShiftX Euron Greyjoy video. So, and you know, we talked about Valyrian hybridization, blood magic, atrocity, abominations. So, look, it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. There are a shocking number of examples in the Game of Thrones books of half-human, half-beast hybrids. George Martin returns to that idea maybe too often. And so, look, maybe there's a half-crab critter running around there somewhere. Tyrone, thanks for the super chat, who says, I wonder if that was the first time Helena walked in on Kristen and Alicent. Yeah, I think that Kristen and Alicent may have been having sex for some time. And I wonder if Otto suspects. I wonder if Helena already knew. I wonder what Aegon and Aemond would think. I think there's a lot of potential for drama if that gets found out. Thank you, Dolorous Ted, who says, I recommend Elric of Melniboné by Michael Moorcock. Yeah, Elric of Melniboné is a fantasy series that had a big influence on George R.R. Martin. A lot of the stuff with like Rhaegar and Bloodraven and the whole Valyrian Empire is heavily influenced by Melniboné. which was an empire of dragon lords who were pale. Well, Elric specifically is pale, and he's a sorcerer, and he's a warrior, and he's a sad boy, just like Rhaegar Targaryen. And like a lot of the themes of like magic and just like the tone and, you know, the emotional tone of it, there is a lot of Moorcock in the world of Ice and Fire. In fact, there are some really direct references to characters like Hercune and Elric are mentioned in the World of Ice and Fire world book, which are references to Elric of Melniboné. There's a YouTuber called Crusader Chris who has a good video comparing Ice and Fire to Elric of Melniboné, so you might want to check that out. Thank you, Skeeter Dude, who says, do you think when Allery Florent is Alicent's mum when she was praying? Well, we did find out this episode that Alicent's mother is named Allery Florent, and we talked a bit about how Allery was religious, and that's how Alicent got her connection to religion. Alamist says, keep it crispy. Thank you. Yes, we will be doing these live streams weekly, right after each episode of House of the Dragon airs at about 10 p.m. Eastern Time Sundays, so like and subscribe. Thank you, Loch Ness, who says, I'm interested, how much time before the stream starts do you watch the episode? I literally watch the episode as soon as it's up for streaming, then jump straight here after. Yeah, we have recently gotten a bit more access than we used to have, which is great. And so I am hoping that we will get the edited, scripted, Alt-Shift-X episode explained videos out a bit more quickly than we did last season. Thank you, Lucas, who says, Happy Father's Day. Hope you get to spend some time with some of your many bastards around the Seven Kingdoms. Happy to see an Alt-Shift-Sex stream. Thank you, Lucas. Saint Naive says, thank you for the Season 2 coverage. And extend a thanks to legendary rock duo Gliggy Pop and Schwavid Bowie for everything they've been putting out. Yeah, well, Glidus and my evil half-brother Alt-Shift-X are dropping a large amount of content soon. Keep an eye on Glidus's channel. There are about to be some things over there. Thank you, Shrimp on the Derby, who says, can you talk about the differences between Blood and Cheese in the show versus the book? Yeah, I did talk about that a bit earlier in this stream. The main difference, I think, is that they force Helena to choose between killing Jaehaerys and killing Maelor, which I think makes her feel even more responsible. It's somehow even more traumatic in the book. And also, I think Blood and Cheese's plan makes a bit more sense in the book, because they, like, creep up through the walls of the Tower of the Hand instead of wandering around through the keep. And they can't get access to Helena, but they figure out a plan to get Helena to come to them, which I think makes a bit more difference, but I can understand them skipping that awkward logistics in the show. Nikki says, ever think of covering Mike Flanagan's Netflix horror series? I don't know that. The current plan is after House of the Dragon Season 2, we've got a bunch of Dune videos coming. We've got a bunch of Dune videos, some of which are almost done, but we'll get to those after Hot Day Season 2. I have been watching The Three Body Problem, the book and the Netflix show, which has been fun, even if it was made by D&D as co-showrunners. But yeah, that's an interesting series that I have thought maybe might be interesting to make videos about. But there are a million possibilities. Plovo says, wonder if they're playing into the idea that some autistic folks are averse to lying, or if Helena just panicked or wanted to be sure to save one. Yeah, Helena's behavior was interesting when she, you know, like Blood was saying that, oh, there's no way that Helena is going to honestly tell us which one is her son. But Helena did honestly say which child was her son. I don't know if that, like... like, the assumption and the implication was that, well, Jaehaerys is more valuable than Jaehaera. So Jaehaerys would lie to... so Helena would lie to protect Jaehaerys, because, of course, Helena would want her daughter Jaehaera to die instead of Jaehaerys. Like, I think that's Blood's implication. That's the only reason why Helena would lie, right? But I don't think Helena agrees that Jaehaerys is inherently more valuable than Jaehaera. I imagine that Helena loves her children equally, Or maybe Jaheira is the more fun one. I don't know, but I think that, there's a gendered assumption of which child is more valuable that they are playing up in this episode. And yeah, Helena's panic is interesting as well. Like, it would have made sense to scream as soon as she got out of that room. But Helena is different. Her behavior is unusual sometimes, and I think that was true before, and it continues to be true now. Thank you, Derek, who says, so ready for weekly videos. Thank you, Derek. Teching says, did you catch Dalton Greyjoy being suggested as the new master of ships? He is basically an edgy, bloodthirsty anime villain. He sure is. Dalton Greyjoy has some fun backstory in the books. Shall we talk a little bit about the Red Kraken? I won't reveal too much because we might see him at some point on screen. But Dalton is young. He's only about 16 years old. But from a very young age, he was intense. He was violent. He was the quintessential Ironborn raider who loved three things: the sea, his sword, and women. I'm not sure if he really loved the women. He takes a lot of salt wives, which are, basically sex slaves, and he disposes of them almost as quickly as he takes new ones. He's a monster who raids and burns and attacks people. He's raided as far as the Basilisk Isles. He's sailed as far as Old Geese, actually, which is like Slaver's Bay. Like, this guy's been around. He's a teenager, but he's been all the way over here to Slaver's Bay, from all the way over here in the Iron Islands. He hasn't gone quite as far as Corlys Velaryon, who's gone all the way to Yi Ti, and I think Ashai. So Corlys is like the greatest explorer, but Dalton, for a teenager, has done pretty bloody well. But he also has murdered a lot of people. So, the point is that Dalton is a loose cannon. He has a Valyrian steel longsword called Nightfall, and I think a Valyrian steel sword is basically a mandatory accessory for any anime supervillain. Just like Daemon has a Valyrian steel sword called Dark Sister, which I am certain that Aemond is extremely envious of. Aemond does not have a Valyrian steel sword, and I bet he wants one. So yeah, Dalton is a loose cannon. He's violent. He does have a great fleet, which could be very useful for the Greens if they want to counter the Velaryon fleet. But it remains to be seen if Dalton will ally with the Greens. Jess says, who is a worse Kingsguard? The one for Aegon II or the one for Joffrey? Yeah, like, are you saying, is it worse to be loyal to Aegon or worse to be loyal for Joffrey? I feel like Joffrey has fewer redeeming characteristics, especially in the show. I think Joffrey might be a worse person in the TV show than he is in the books, because in the show, Joffrey, like, murders Ros and another woman with a crossbow for no reason, just for his own pleasure. I think Joffrey might be more evil than in the books. So, yeah, and Joffrey is, like, less sympathetic than Aegon, although Aegon also is a monster. So, I mean, look, pick your poison. Pick your poison. Peyton is excited for the tapestry. Oathkeeper says, I'm glad I didn't read Fire and Blood yet. Yeah, I mean, Fire and Blood says what's going to happen. Fire and Blood says who wins, who loses, who dies, who lives, who tells their story. But as someone who's read Fire and Blood, I'm still enjoying the reveals and the surprises. There are a lot of surprises, even for people who've read the books, because the books don't have all the answers and all the detail. The books are really only a very brief summary of this conflict. And so all the details, all the dialogue, all the character depth is new and created for the show. So it's kind of fun either way, really. Thank you, Daniel. And thank you, Gustavo, who says it was tragic and poetic that one of the few people listening to Helena and understanding Helena was the person about to murder her son. Yeah, I agree. Like, Cheese is one of the only people who really pays attention to what Helena is saying, and he uses that against her. Ali says, Aemond is now heir, correct? Well, yeah, that's That is a good question. Because yeah, in the books and in the opening sequence for season 1, Aegon and Helena have a third child, a son named Maelor. So with Jaehaerys dead, Maelor would be the heir. Now, if Maelor doesn't exist in the show, then Jaehaera would be the heir, a female. But we're going through a pretty considerable kerfuffle right now, which is all about women not being allowed on the throne and men ruling instead. So it's not absolutely clear who the heir would be. You would probably argue that the heir is Aemond, as the brother of the king. And Aemond was saying that last season that I am the heir, I will be the next on the throne. So you can certainly see a potential conflict between Aemond and Jaehaera for the throne. I mean, Jaehaera is probably not particularly interested in feudal politics at this tender young age, but it would be funny if there was a succession crisis within the Greens, who are themselves having a succession crisis with the Blacks. Maybe monarchy was not a great idea. Just throwing it out there. Just putting it out there that maybe this was a bad system from the start. Beauty says, what's your opinion on Alicent and Kristen? Does it have plot relevance, or is it just HBO's proclivity for gratuitous sex scenes? I don't think the sex scene felt gratuitous to me. We've spoken in this stream about how I think it is interesting for Alicent's character because she's always tried to be dutiful and to follow the rules of this society about what women are allowed to do. And that's how she's always considered herself different to Rhaenyra and considered herself better to Rhaenyra, is because she follows those rules of like women not having sex except with their husband and in the prescribed ways and being ladylike and being proper. I think it's interesting to subvert that and to question that by Alicent actually using her body for her own pleasure. Finally, after all these years of, Viserys and duty and doing nothing for herself, I think it's interesting for her to explore that. But of course, it also makes her a massive hypocrite because she's been complaining about her Rhaenyra. And it also could get Kristen killed. I mean, that's one of the other angles here, right? Kristen is sworn to obey Alicent. He is also sworn to never have sex. So which oath does he keep? If the Queen demands cunnilingus, does Kristen disobey her, breaking his oath? Or does he have sex with her, breaking his oath? He's caught between a rock and a hard place. And Kristen does appear uncomfortable in the scene where they're having sex. So, we don't really know how Kristen feels about this. Does Kristen love it? Is Kristen terrified? Is he enjoying the forbidden sex? Is it a mix of all of those things? I don't know. But, I mean, remember when Kristen confessed his sex to Rhaenyra in season 1 and he was like, I ask only that I be executed cleanly instead of being tortured to death. Kristen knows that could be the consequence of him having sex, is being tortured to death. I don't think Kristen is thrilled about that. There's something messed up about Kristen being obligated to have sex that could get him tortured to death, no? So there's definitely layers to this. Thank you for the super chat from Jess. Jess is being very generous. Thank you, Jess. And Jess says, I wonder how Aemond will feel now that his nephew is dead. Yeah, well, we talked about the idea that, Aemond could be arguably the heir to the throne now that Jaehaerys is dead, if Maelor doesn't exist. God, wouldn't it be funny if Aemond murdered Maelor so that he could be the heir to the throne? It's so funny how Aemond parallels Daemon in all these ways, isn't it? This is the way says, how big is Vermithor? Well, we saw Vermithor last season. Vermithor is the dragon that was once ridden by Jaehaerys, King Jaehaerys, the old king. And Vermithor is now, doesn't have a rider and is living under Dragonstone. And I think Daemon hopes to use Vermithor in the war. I don't know how many metric tons Vermithor weighs, but he looks like a big boy when you compare him to Daemon here. He's certainly one of the oldest dragons alive. I think Vermithor is the second oldest and second biggest and second most powerful dragon after Vhagar, I think. So, yeah, he is formidable. I love his toothy, scarred face that we saw in Season 1, and I hope to get more Vermithor action this season. It is sad that we haven't seen Maelor or Daeron. Thank you, Donals, who says, were you underwhelmed by some of the changes in the book? Alicent and Crispy's relationship seems odd. Blood and cheese is toned down. Yeah, I agree that those things are some of the main differences. But I'm pretty on board for most of them, personally. Noah says, hi, Shiftifer. Do you think Aegon accidentally made crappy Valyrian steel when he made the throne with Balerion? Yeah, so Aegon took up the swords of his fallen and surrendered enemies, and he forged the Iron Throne, and that is the throne that the Targaryens have sat upon ever since. And it has been said or hinted, I think it's been hinted, that the way that the Iron Throne was made was with the fires of the Targaryen dragons. And there are theories that about how Valyrian steel is created. Valyrian steel is the special, strong, light steel that can kill White Walkers. And there's all these theories about, well, how do you make Valyrian steel? Because the secret was lost when Valyria fell in the Doom. And one theory is that if you use dragonfire, you can make Valyrian steel. So there is an idea that, well, what if the entire Iron Throne is Valyrian steel because it was made with dragonfire? Now, I don't think that's the case. Like, I think that if the Iron Throne was Valyrian steel, people would have noticed. I think that making Valyrian steel probably involves blood magic, maybe human sacrifice, and it probably involves, deliberate smithing by skilled smiths who know the spells and stuff. So I think that's probably what's going on. But yeah, there are some interesting theories, though. Thanks, Lauren, who says, happy Father's Day to J-Rock of House Blakely, father of dragons. We'll get it right this time, baby. I love you. Thank you, Lauren, for the generous donations. And happy Father's Day to J-Rock. Thank you, One-Eyed Crow, who says, I don't know if you already covered this, but who was Jace holding at Luke's funeral? Yeah, at Luke's funeral, Jace was holding little Joffrey. Joffrey is the third and youngest son of Rhaenyra and Harwin, and it is so sad that he's holding Luke's little horse toy. Marissa says that Alicent is living in Rhaenyra's old chambers. Ah, I didn't notice that. That's cool. It is funny for Alicent to not only be living in Rhaenyra's room, but to be having secret sex with Kristen, just like Rhaenyra did. Jillian says, how do you feel about Cregan teasing the prophecy without saying it? If he believes it's important, why not say it? Yeah, I agree. It was a bit of a tease, the conversation between Cregan and Jace. Because they sort of hint at the idea that, Aegon, the Targaryens and the Starks are united by this prophecy of ice and fire, the idea that they must unite to defeat the White Walkers. But they don't actually talk directly about it. I mean, maybe Cregan knows about the prophecy and he was, fishing to see whether Jace knows about the prophecy, and only if Jace knew about it would Cregan talk about it with him, maybe. But, I've never understood why the prophecy needs to be a secret, it seems important. It seems like everyone should talk about this prophecy to stop the White Walkers. That's one of the things that I don't love about this change, because in the books, there isn't evidence that Aegon had a dream about White Walkers. He may have, but it hasn't come up in the books yet. So, yeah, it's a little weird. I do wonder if we might get a bit more of Cregan and Jace's conversations later, maybe through flashback. I don't know. Rayday says, do you think Rhaenyra getting to Kristen first was another reason Alicent was angry with her? I do, actually, yeah, because, in Season 1, Kristen was at that tournament, and Kristen chatted to Rhaenyra and Alicent, and they were clearly both crushing on him. Alicent in particular, I think, was crushing on Kristen, not just Rhaenyra. So I think you're right. I think that Alicent might be jealous that, hey, we both liked Kristen. Why are you the one that gets to have sex with him? That's so unfair. I think that is part of it. Jonathan says that Daemon loves dead baby jokes. He sure does with the air for a day thing. Although we still never saw him say the words, and we still don't know exactly what the context was. J.S. says, according to Sir Eric, the Kingsguard oath is to take no wife, father no children, just like the Night's Watch. So are Alicent and Cole getting off on a technicality? I enjoy the pun, J.S. Yeah, I think that we saw the Kingsguard oath for the first time in Season 1 on screen, I believe. I forget what the exact wording is, but I mean, it is a bit like the Night's Watch, where, you know, Sam in Game of Thrones says that, I mean, yeah, we're not meant to have sex, but the Night's Watch oath doesn't say don't have sex. It says take no wives and father no children. So as long as your pull-out game is good enough, I guess you can still have sex. At the Night's Watch, lots of Night's Watch men do have sex with women in Molestown, even though that seems to be against the spirit of the oath, as most people interpret it. So I guess you're arguing that since Alicent and Cole were having oral sex, they weren't technically, fathering any children or marrying, so therefore it's okay. Look, you could make that argument, but I do not think that argument would save Kristen from being executed. Maybe Alicent and Kristen entertain that idea. Maybe Alicent's like, oh, it's totally fine. We're not, just the tip, it's fine. You know, like, who knows? I'm sure they are enjoying that, but I don't think it would save Kristen. Lillian says, when Alicent lights the candles, she says Lucerys Velaryon. It seems like she doesn't care about the bastard thing so much anymore. Yeah, that's a good point. I agree, Lillian. Because, you know, Alicent has been frustrated that, you know, Rhaenyra's children are bastards, and that's kind of a big part of the reason why she's currently warring against Rhaenyra, because Jace, Luke, and Joff are not legitimate and are not really the rightful heirs. And yet, Alicent calls Luke Velaryon, as though he was legitimate, as though he wasn't a bastard, as though he wasn't a strong. Yeah, I agree. Maybe that's a bygone now. But that's the problem. I mean, like, Alicent can forgive the events of Season 1, but now there are whole new bloody atrocities being committed. New murders of Jaehaerys and Luke. And so, you know, by the time they've gotten over last year's atrocities, they've committed new crimes to get angry at each other for. So I don't know if this is going to get any better. Philip says, I believe Alicent and Cole will come up with a cover story for Blood and Cheese to protect themselves. Yeah, so it's possible that, you know, I mean, you know, maybe next episode Helena is going to say, hey, everybody, the Queen and Kristen were having sex while my child was being murdered. Kristen did bad. Alicent did bad. Maybe Helena will do that. Or maybe Helena will say, oh, yeah, no, Alicent and Cole, they were playing checkers together. They were doing their emails. They were braiding each other's hair innocently, and that's why Kristen wasn't guarding my son. Maybe that's what Helena will say. I don't know. We'll find out. Thank you, Nuke Fandango, and thank you, Rachel Katrin, who says, please ask Alt-Shift-X and Glidus to do a spoiler chat sometime. Yeah, so I believe Alt-Shift-X and Glidus are doing weekly chats about each episode of House of the Dragon Season 2, which I believe you can watch on Nebula in the link below. Check out Glidus's channel for a free preview of that soon. So yeah, I think a spoiler chat there might make sense, because I don't think we're going to get into spoilers here on Alt-Shift-X, because there's so much stuff to cover as it is. Thank you, Kaiser, who says, Blood and Cheese didn't question if they would get paid. Yeah, there's a little more detail in the book. I mean, didn't Daemon pay half the money up front and half the money after the deed is done? And Kaiser argues that makes me think Daemon gives the okay, and Daemon would be fine with it. Yeah, so the question is, like, did Daemon say you can kill Jaehaerys if you can't find Aemond? Will he still pay them if they kill Jaehaerys instead of Aemond? I get what you're saying. Like, if Daemon didn't say you can kill Jaehaerys instead of Aemond, then Blood and Cheese surely wouldn't have killed Jaehaerys, because it was made very clear that they are motivated by money, and Daemon's only going to pay them the other half of the money if they do the job correctly. So yeah, you're right. I think that's a good argument that suggests that Daemon must have okayed them killing Jaehaerys instead of Aemond. So yeah, maybe fan favorite Daemon did order the death of an innocent child this episode. CC says it is so sad when Jace comes back to Rhaenyra, and I agree. First Name says, do you think Maelor might just exist later? Yeah, maybe they want to introduce Maelor, the third child of Aegon and Helena, later on in, season 3 or something, so that Maelor can be older after more time has passed, because it's kind of annoying to have super, super young characters and actors. Yeah, I agree, that might make sense. I'm sure having little toddler Maelor would be almost as annoying as having all those CGI direwolves in Game of Thrones, which is why they didn't appear very much. Blue Toads says, Larys tells Alicent that he has replaced castle staff and put in his own hand-picked replacements. Does that put suspicion on him in light of Blood and Cheese? Yeah, I think it does. Like, I think it's weird that Larys said, oh yeah, I'm in charge of all these people now, but also Cheese comes and murders Jaehaerys in the same episode. That suggests that Larys either doesn't have as much control as he thinks, or he knew or allowed Cheese to murder Jaehaerys, which I think are both interesting possibilities. New says, what a badass move to assassinate the sons of Aegon. Like, that's right, I could have killed you, but I didn't. Yeah, that is another element to Blood and Cheese, is that it shows that, we snuck into the Red Keep. We killed a member of the royal family. We could have killed all of them, but we didn't. Right? Because, Blood and Cheese killed Jaehaerys. They could have also killed Helena. They could have killed the Queen. They could have killed Jaehaerys. They could have tried to kill Alicent and Aegon as well, possibly. And there is something scary about that restraint, It's like more of a threat. It's like, I could have killed you all, but I didn't. I mean, it's kind of reminiscent of when Rhaenys could have killed all of the Greens in Season 1, but didn't. But it's a little bit different when you are killing little Jaehaerys. Thank you for the super chat from Hairless Oyster. Nice to see you, Hairless Oyster. Who says, I just want the truth, even if it's sidewalk bubblegum logic. Did you get hydrated for this episode? Is Glidus watching? Can I say hi to him? Is cold brew coffee better? Is money cool? Is Carter baking? Hairless Oyster, as always, is asking the real questions. I will hydrate. Thank you, Hairless Oyster. But the answers to all those questions are yes, maybe, yes, no, maybe, yes. Thank you, Hairless Oyster. Nate Morris says that Helena can kind of see the future. So do you think it was her dream to reveal the heir instead of trying to deceive? Yeah, I mean, Helena was afraid of rats. So in some sense, she foresaw the rat catcher Cheese killing her son. So maybe there's a sense of inevitability for her. Like, she knows that something terrible is going to happen, so maybe she knows that she can't stop it. And maybe that's part of why she was kind of passive in this scene and did point to Jaehaerys. It's like, to her, it's inevitable. She has seen the threads of fate, like the tapestry in the opening sequence, so there's no point in her trying to stop what's coming. Usually the way the prophecy works in these stories is that people try to avert the prophecy, but it comes true anyway. Or the prophecy comes true, but not in the way that people expected. So that might be part of what's going on with Helena. You can't play games with destiny. And so, part of the question is, well, what's the point of having visions of the future if you can't change the future? It's like how, Viserys' dreams are part of what destroyed him. He had the dreams that he was going to have a son on the throne, and he thought it was going to be Balon, but it wasn't, so he made Rhaenyra his heir, but then he had Aegon, and then he thought Aegon maybe should be the king. Dreams are a metaphor for ambition, desire, hope, plans, and sometimes our plans don't go the way we hoped, and maybe sometimes our dreams destroy us. Owen says, what is your favorite character in the dance? Mine is Corlys. I think that Tom Glencarney is having an enormous amount of fun playing Aegon, and I'm having fun watching him have fun. CZA says, I wish George Martin would buy me a burrito. Are you excited for the Jon Snow show, if that's happening? There was talk of a Jon Snow spin-off show, a sequel show to Game of Thrones happening, but according to the most recent reports, the Snow show is no longer happening, which I'm not heartbroken about because it doesn't sound like the most interesting idea for a spin-off to me, and there are still many, many other potential spin-off shows in development, so it doesn't seem we will run out of Westeros stories anytime soon. Rayday points out that Alicent's mother was a Florent and was religious, just like how Stannis' wife, Selyse, was also religious, although Selyse worshipped the Lord of Light R'hllor instead of the Faith of the Seven. Yeah, I wonder if the Florents have a history of being particularly religious. Well, we do know that the Florents have a history of having particularly big ears, so I wonder if Alicent's mother had big ears. Alicent does not appear to have gotten that gene. WCM says, did Grease dribble down George Martin's beard when he ate burritos with you and Glidus? I could not possibly disclose whether or not Grease dribbled down George Martin's beard, because I respect that it was an off-the-record conversation, but I will confirm that the burritos were delicious. Christmas red and green chilies are pretty tasty. Carter says, will we see Dalton Greyjoy, Lord of the Iron Islands, the Red Kraken? I don't know, but I hope we find out. Jake says, maybe Larys didn't know of Cheese's spy status since he's the rat catcher. Larys couldn't see through those eyes afterwards. Larys equals Warg confirmed. So there is the theory that Larys is a skin changer, and that the way he knows what's going on in the keep is that he can enter the minds of the rats and see through their eyes to spy. And it would be very funny if Larys was trying to see through the eyes of the rats while the rat catchers were catching and killing the rats, which was probably very distressing for Larys. I wonder if they're playing cat and mouse and cheese running around the keep. That would be funny, but that's only a wild theory. Thank you, I'm under the oak tree, who says, at least Alicent has been having some stress release. Crispy Boy is only good for one type of service. Yeah, Kristen's good at fighting things. Maybe he's also good at making love. One should hope so, because both Rhaenyra and Alicent have risked a lot to get in bed with him. Thank you, Visenya the Conqueror, who says, why do you think about Helena choosing her son? Yeah, well, I think the idea that it was inevitable is interesting. And I think the idea that men are not inherently more valuable than women is also another idea why Helena pointed at her son. But I think that feeling of helplessness is going to haunt Helena, and I'm really curious to see how the trauma of this murder might affect Helena. I wonder if Helena will continue to be a fairly passive character, or if she'll become a more active character. I mean, let's not forget that Helena has a fire-breathing dragon called Dreamfire. I mean, maybe Helena's gonna get on Dreamfire next episode and just fly screaming at Daemon Targaryen to roast his ass. That would be cool. I think there's a lot of possibilities. Thank you, Bootleg Potato, who says, did I remember wrong? In the book, did Blood and Cheese ask which kid she'd want to kill and choose the opposite? They did. It was awful. We discussed that earlier. Thank you, Gunnar, who says, money is the key to happiness with the things it can buy. Hope you enjoy money too. Well, thank you for the $10 dues. I will enjoy them. Thank you. We talked about the Jon Snow show. AR asks if they merged Adam with Alan. No, there are both Adam and Alan involved in this story. Adam and Alan have been cast by Abubakar Salim is playing Alan, and Clinton Liberty is playing Adam, and I'm excited to see more from them. Thank you, Mike, who says that Maelor is in the scene where Aegon comes to find his son. He's in the background with the maids, I think. Is that a true fact? I didn't see him. We do see Jaehaera in the scene with Aegon and Helena. I didn't think we saw... Because that's Jaehaera over there, I believe. Are you saying that Maelor is somewhere in the corner of this scene? I didn't see Maelor. Maybe I'll have to take a closer look. Is he in that basket? Where are you hiding, Maelor? Is Daeron in there too? Come out and show... All right. Thank you, Tanya, who says, why doesn't the Queen have guards guarding her during the war? Well, Kristen is one of the guards, and he was busy having sex with her. But I agree. It did seem a little unrealistic. Stephen says, when is the Dune video coming? There will be many Alt-Shift-X Dune videos in the future talking about the new Dune movie and talking about other things, and I'm excited to make them, and they're going to be cool, but they are a while away because we have a lot of Dragon work ahead of us, and we will probably take a break after House of the Dragon Season 2. So there are Dune videos coming, but I don't know when. Thank you, Jess, who says... Was Daemon hoping that Jaehaerys would be killed so that he could fight Aemond? That's a fun idea, because there does seem to be a bit of a rivalry between Daemon and Aemond. I mean, look, I don't think that Daemon thinks about Aemond as much as Aemond thinks about Daemon. You know what I mean? Here's some charming artwork by @MCQRAW. I don't think Daemon thinks about Aemond that much, but I do think that Aemond has a poster of Daemon on his wall. You know what I mean? Daemon is the more older, more established, more famous dude, and I think Aemond aspires to be as cool and badass as Daemon. I don't know if Daemon has as much to prove to Aemond as Aemond does to Daemon, you know? But I agree that Daemon would probably enjoy fighting Aemond, because he loves a challenge and he loves a fight. So, yeah, maybe. I mean, you know, did Daemon really expect Cheese the Rat Catcher and Blood the Gold Cloak to be able to kill Prince Aemond Targaryen, Rider of Vhagar? I mean, did Daemon even know for sure that Aemond would be in the Red Keep? Aemond might have been flying around on Vhagar at the time, for all Daemon knows. It was not a great plan, if we're being honest. Daemon just let these guys loose in the Red Keep to just kill whoever they found, it seems, and that might not have been very responsible. Thank you, Dildo T. Baggins, who says, happy to have this series back. Can't wait to see more from you. And Sir Pounce says, I am the true king of the Seven Kingdoms. We will answer a few more donations. I'm doing as many as I can, but we've been talking for 3 hours, so we're going to have to wrap this up soon. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for donating. Thank you all for participating. Like and subscribe. We will make weekly videos as well as weekly live streams. It's going to be a good time. Elvish says it's implied Daemon told them a son for a son. I don't think he could have meant anyone else but Jaehaerys. Yeah, but here's the thing. Aemond is Alicent's son. Jaehaerys is not Alicent's son. Jaehaerys is Aegon's son. But when we say a son for a son, like, I think we're talking about Aemond for Luke. Daemon wants to avenge Rhaenyra's son Luke by killing Alicent's son Aemond. I think that's the meaning of a son for a son. It would be a bit more weird and complicated if it was avenge Rhaenyra's son Luke by killing Alicent's son Aemond, or killing Alicent's grandson Jaehaerys, aka Aegon and Helena's son Jaehaerys. You know what I mean? It becomes a little confused. A son for a son is a great slogan catchphrase, but it's not very clear when you're trying to target an assassination. So, I don't know. I think it's a little ambiguous. I am interested to see how they clarify it in the next episode, if at all. I think they will probably continue the pattern of Daemon allowing people to believe he's a monster because deep down he knows he is. Thank you, King Aegon, who says, decided to tip you to the royal treasury. Hope you buy some cheese and arbor gold. Salih says, I miss your analysis. Love from Saudi Arabia. Thank you, Salih. And thank you, Tanya, who says, why did he kick the dog? Yeah, I'm starting to think that Cheese is not a good person. Nelly is jealous of Crispin. And Brown Boy says, maybe Blood and Cheese was successful only because Alicent dismissed Larys's new staff so she could carry on. Yeah, that's an interesting idea as well. I mean, maybe some of the, guards and people in the Red Keep, maybe there are fewer guards because Larys made sure they were no longer breathing our air. Like, Larys has killed some of the Red Keep staff, so maybe that's why there were fewer of them. Of course, we also know that, Eric has left, and Harold Westerling, another Kingsguard, left the Greens. So there have been defections, there have been staffing problems at King's Landing recently, so that could also help explain why there were not guards stopping them. All right. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Please like and subscribe. You can listen to these live streams as audio on a podcast app of your choice or on Spotify on the Alt-Shift-X podcast feed. There are links in the description. There's also a separate podcast feed for the audio from main Alt-Shift-X videos. Slightly confusing, I know. But it's been real. We will talk lots more about dragons over the next 8 weeks, and it's going to be a good time. Thank you. I apologize if you donated and I didn't read your message, but it's been 3 hours, so we're going to close it up before I lose the ability to speak. It was fun. See you next time. Cheers.